ended. That's what made me cry more. I'm very sad.
But now he is home and safe. His mum insists there is hope for the future.
He says Alaji did not have an easy life. So her own hope for Alaji is Alaji to find here what he was trying to go for when he used the back way.
And that's the thing. For people to stay, creating opportunities at home is key. But it's hard to do overnight, and the lure of Europe remains strong. For the Gambia, determined, ambitious young people like Alaji are a valuable resource. So the question is, where does he see his future?
I would like to go back to school. I want to be a learning man, but what worries me is that how can I help myself? How can I help my family?
Do you think you might try again at some future time?
Some future time this way? I don't think so. I don't think so. No. A lot of people lost their life, but alhamdulillah, I'm still alive.
This episode of Assignment was presented by me, Alex Last. The producer was Ellie House.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live downtown with another edition of the show. We're on air till 8:37 with you, and thanks for joining us. If you need to reach us early about the commute, you can always call us at 788-3093. Let's say good morning to the team before we check a little bit of weather and headlines here. Mae McKillop is directing the show and covering the commute. Hi, Mae. Good morning to Kevin Nipatebo, who is our YouTube producer, saying hello to you on YouTube if you're watching already. And good morning to Abby Adeyemi, also giving his wave on YouTube. Abby's our technical producer on the program and covers the forecast on air. So it makes it sun and cloud for Winnipeg today. Chance of flurries late this afternoon and windy. But we do have weather warnings. Let's actually go to Heather Wells for that. She's in our news center today. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's an Alberta clipper, always bringing trouble. The winter storm watch has been issued for southern Manitoba with snow and blowing snow beginning tomorrow, creating reduced visibility and treacherous driving. And it is a snowfall warning for parts of central and northern Manitoba with between 15 and 20 centimeters of snow expected tonight into Friday. So lots to watch out for right across the province, starting later today. And you can now drive on southbound Main Street by the Sutherland Hotel. Main had been closed in both directions since early yesterday when fire broke out at that vacant hotel. It's not known if anyone was inside, but this morning Winnipeg police say southbound Main is open. Northbound lanes are still blocked between Higgins and Jarvis. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That was quite something, watching the Sutherland, right? Did you see the video? Wow, the flames were incredible. We're going to talk about the heritage of that building. That's coming up in the first hour of the show. Also in the first hour of InfoRad this morning, talking tariffs and trade. We'll take you to Ottawa. We'll check in with a guest about what came out of the meeting yesterday between the Prime Minister and the First Ministers in some more detail. And of course, Premier Wab Kinew did speak on his way in and out of that meeting. So we had full coverage of that, but we'll have some analysis this morning. Also on the program today, what is the city's role in the new strategy to end chronic homelessness? We're going to ask the mayor when he's here for our monthly interview. So stay tuned for that. Scott Gillingham will be live in studio in the second hour of Information Radio. Of course, the ceasefire in the Middle East is top news, and let's go to World Report next for that.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Real-life married Canadian actors Paul Gross and Martha Burns are appearing on stage together to play one of theater's most dysfunctional couples, George and Martha from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Paul and Martha will be here to tell you why they wanted to take on this role and how they're finding the love in it.
What you see one night, you absolutely could never see again.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Israel's security cabinet is supposed to convene this morning to approve a ceasefire deal with Hamas, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that meeting is now postponed. He says Hamas has reneged on parts of the deal. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is in Jerusalem following developments. And Sasha, what seems to be the holdup?
Well, this is a really complex deal, and there's a lot of logistical details in this that seem to go beyond what a normal ceasefire might be. You know, even as the mediators were announcing that this deal was done, the officials and the negotiators were still, in fact, hammering out certain things. And it seems now that some of that wasn't hammered out completely. Even yesterday, the Israeli government said there wouldn't be an official announcement until they were finished with all of this. And it seems as though this morning that is delaying the government vote and the cabinet meeting vote, which has to happen before this ceasefire goes into effect. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accusing Hamas of introducing new things or reneging on elements of the deal, which everybody assumed were done.
What have we heard from Hamas?
Hamas has put out just a very short statement saying that it is committed to the ceasefire agreement as it was announced yesterday. But of course, that leaves a lot of questions that are vague.
This ceasefire deal has been celebrated by leaders around the world, but are there signs it could cause political issues for Netanyahu?
It has caused political issues for him. And in fact, many people believe that it didn't happen earlier because of these threats by Netanyahu's political allies. These are far-right, hardline parties that want to fight until total victory. That's their slogan. And even today, two of these parties are threatening to quit the coalition if the deal goes ahead. We're not sure what's going to happen yet, but that's the discussion that's going on now and is putting a lot of pressure on Netanyahu.
Thank you, Sasha.
My pleasure.
CBC correspondent Sasha Petrusik reporting from Jerusalem. Local authorities in Gaza say dozens of people have been killed and about 200 more injured in Israeli airstrikes. They say the strikes happened after the ceasefire agreement was announced yesterday. Crystal Gomansing is following developments from London.
In Gaza City, a group stands solemnly around white plastic body bags, rugs, even blankets covering their loved ones' remains. Their pain and fear on display so soon after a ceasefire announcement. Saeed al-Saad is a resident of northern Gaza.
As much as we lost, we are looking for the future. We're looking for what is next. We still have hope. We can do things. We can rebuild our homes.
A surge of aid into Gaza, 600 trucks per day, is a part of the first phase of the ceasefire deal. Tom Fletcher, the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordination, says helping those in need will be a challenge.
The security conditions are dire and the political conditions are difficult because of those different groups who will want this to fail. But we'll be in there. We will work around the clock to get this aid in and make this happen.
Peace in the region is the goal, says Mustafa Barghouti. The West Bank politician and leader of the Palestinian National Initiative says for that to happen, the underlying issue, Israeli occupation, has to be addressed.
We have to deal with the core problem, allowing Palestinians to be free from occupation, from oppression, allowing us to have democracy, to have prosperity. This is what we are aiming for.
Like others, he is hopeful this ceasefire deal can lead to change, but it is still dependent on many moving parts. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Mark Carney says he is a Liberal outsider, but one with the skills to lead the party. And today, the former Bank of Canada governor could formally launch his campaign. He's expected to make the announcement in Edmonton, a city that right now has just one Liberal riding. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, Edmonton, why is Carney kicking off his campaign in Alberta?
Marcia, let's say you were a brand new Liberal leader, you didn't have a seat in the House of Commons, and you were looking for a safe place to run. Well, Alberta ain't it. Edmonton is, though, where Carney grew up. And launching a political bid, well, that's all about storytelling. So, well, yes, he has headed up the central bank into G7 economies. And yes, he moves in powerful circles, lives in a posh Ottawa neighborhood now. But he was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. His dad once ran, unsuccessfully, for the Liberals in Edmonton back in Pierre Trudeau's day. He grew up in the city's hockey rinks, still apparently cheers for the Oilers. So in the days leading up to officially putting on the Liberal jersey, there he is, lacing up his hockey skates on Instagram, checking out the ice conditions on the Rideau Canal last weekend, and elsewhere on social media for the last few days. The endorsements have begun, including from members of the current Liberal caucus, who aren't the be-all, end-all of winning this race. Votes from registered Liberals in ridings not currently held by a Liberal count just as much, but MPs bring organizational teams. One of them, Parm Bains, is going to be hosting an event for Carney in Greater Vancouver tonight. Immediately after this launch, MP George Chahal from Calgary was out spreading the word about this launch earlier this week. But if Carney was hoping to run in the only Edmonton seat currently held by a Liberal, well, that gets awkward because Randy Boissonnault was out on social media yesterday announcing he intends to run again. And Boissonnault's endorsing Chrystia Freeland.
All right. Well, speaking of Freeland, what about her launch plans?
She was out on her social feed yesterday, too, saying she's spending hours making calls, would have more to announce soon. Freeland did receive the endorsement of Health Minister Mark Holland yesterday, who confirmed he is running again the 905 and is going to lace up to fight in her corner. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson will also be speaking to reporters this morning on the heels of fighting for Canada's interests in Washington this week. He's still on the fence about a leadership bid.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.
Nice to meet you, Deputy Minister.
A modest welcome for British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Kyiv. Starmer is there to sign a new security and trade pact with Ukraine. It's meant to boost military cooperation between Kyiv and the UK in the Baltic and Black Seas and deter Russia. The visit is also a public show of support for Volodymyr Zelensky. The Ukrainian president has hosted several allied leaders ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday. Joe Biden is leaving public life with a warning for Americans. In his final address as U.S. president last night, Biden says he sees growing danger in the concentration of wealth and power and what it could mean for American democracy. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports from Washington.
My fellow Americans.
Sitting behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office, President Joe Biden used his final speech to the American people to issue a grave warning. After more than 50 years of public service, he made the case that he's leaving the White House at a dangerous time for American democracy.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy.
While he did not mention the president-elect by name, he was outlining his concerns about Donald Trump, the extremely wealthy members of his inner circle, and whether they will respect the guardrails of American democracy, stressing his fears about fast-moving developments in technology and how that, too, is being used in the concentration of power.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit.
Biden leaves the White House a deeply unpopular president, and on that basis, it's likely many voters and his critics will dismiss his warnings in this moment. The real test of this legacy speech will be decades from now, when the country will know whether his fears came true. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
5, 4, lift off.
That is Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket blasting off early this morning from Cape Canaveral, Florida. This is the first mission to space for Jeff Bezos' company. The rocket is 98 meters tall and is traveling at 8 kilometers per second. This launch is the second liftoff attempt this week. An earlier launch was canceled following complications with a propellant line. Until now, Blue Origin has only been used for suborbital space tourism. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime. CBCNews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, hello, Winnipeg, and good morning, Manitoba. 6:10 a.m. is the time. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We're live downtown with our team at the show on CBC. A lot of weather warnings about the cold as it redevelops over our province today, so we'll get into those in a moment. Also, speaking of something that was very hot, that fire, the old Sutherland Hotel on Main Street, going up in flames yesterday. While the hotel had been vacant for years, some say the historic building could have been saved a long time ago. We're going to hear from Heritage Winnipeg this hour. Also, days away from Donald Trump's inauguration, the Prime Minister and the Premiers did meet in Ottawa. We're going to get some analysis of the final thoughts on that meeting. We'll also hear briefly from our Premier, Wab Kinew. And then at 10 to 7 this morning, we're going to get the latest on the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, which aims to pause war in Gaza, but as you heard, is on pause itself this morning. So all of that analysis coming up. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, you mentioned the Sutherland Hotel. That hotel, after the massive fire yesterday, is this morning being demolished. Crews are just moving in now, starting to knock down the remnants of that building. As for driving, you can now drive on southbound Main Street by the Sutherland. Main had been closed in both directions since early yesterday afternoon. But this morning, police say northbound lanes are still blocked on Main between Higgins and Jarvis. Southbound lanes are open. Some Manitoba housing tenants may be offered money by the province so they can afford to switch to housing in the private market. It is one of the province's new part of the new plan to end homelessness. The idea to free up existing social housing units for transitional or supportive housing for people who live in encampments. We're going to hear from the head of the Professional Property Managers Association of Manitoba about just how likely that is. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
Heather, that video of the Sutherland.
Wow, hey?
Wow.
Those flames just shooting out the windows?
I know. And it's funny, right? Because the firefighter interview that was sort of right when this was really engulfed, that's on our website, it went up yesterday afternoon. It's just always... watching how calm firefighters are in the face of all of this is always just so shocking to me that, it was crazy the way it was burning.
Yeah, it went up pretty quickly. And this morning, speaking of being quick, demolition crews are on the scene. We've got photos of that, of backhoes and things like that in there knocking what's left down.
Check our website then. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Our website is cbc.ca/Manitoba. All right, let's go to Abby Adeyemi. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So we have a lot of warnings out there, hey?
Yes, let's start with parts of central and northern Manitoba where we have a snowfall warning in effect. We have an Alberta Clipper heading our way. Also, we do have that winter storm watch in effect for southeastern Manitoba, which includes Winnipeg and surrounding areas all the way down to the Emerson border. That should crawl in on us by tomorrow morning. And this is due to that Alberta Clipper that we're tracking. It's going to bring heavy snow, strong winds, and even sharp drop in temperatures. We should be seeing very dangerous travel conditions once this happens because of blowing snow and poor visibility. So you want to plan accordingly, though this is something we're tracking that should be hitting us overnight into tomorrow. But talking about today, right now, Winnipeg, we are still at -1. We had a beautiful day yesterday, hitting that +2, +1 yesterday, keeping it overnight. It was really, really mild, Mercy.
Didn't we? Right? Like slushy.
Yeah, and the drive in today was also slushy. So you might want to prepare for some windshield fluids if you're doing your commute this morning. Today's forecast for Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we should expect a mix of sun and clouds. Some flurries are likely to hit us late in the afternoon. The winds will start light, then become breezy, shifting from the northwest to the south. The high for today will be around -2. And for tonight, it will stay mostly cloudy. Then there's a good chance of flurries later in the evening as the winds will be shifting to the west. Then it becomes gusty as temperatures will get to -1. For tomorrow, periods of snow will be hitting us, and that's when we get to see all the action happen. But for today, Winnipeg, we're expecting a mix of sun and clouds and a chance of afternoon flurries, highs around -2.
Let's get to the commute now with Mae McKillop. Thank you, Abby. Mae, what's up out there?
No calls on the commuter line so far, but of course we're seeing some slushy conditions with the temperature drop, or the temperature rise, I should say. As Abby said, your windshield wipers, top up the fluid if you need. I know I needed to do that yesterday. And if you're commuting by walking, maybe wear some good boots. Other than that, just looking outside of our city, the northeastern side of our province, there's some lightly snow-covered conditions. In the sort of Bois Vein area, I can see that the plows are moving through Highway number 11 there. And similar to the southwestern side of the province in Bois Vein, snow-covered conditions, and probably some of that slush moving around as well. Anything going on in the commute, you can give me a call and let us know, 204-788-3093.
Well, as we've been telling you, the old Sutherland on Main Street is all but gone now. Demolition crews on site already. It's at 785 Main. It went up in flames yesterday and progressed very quickly. Fire crews were working well into last night and into early this morning, still putting the blaze out. So the Sutherland was already a boarded up building, but it had a long history in our city. Cindy Tugwell is Executive Director of Heritage Winnipeg. She spoke to CBC host Faith Fundell about it.
What do we know about this building in Winnipeg?
Well, we know that it's indicative of sort of modest North Main Street hotels built 1900, and there was a subsequent addition in 1913 that was built, and the architect is Frank Evans. And it was built at the turn of the 20th century to fill the demand for short-term residential space. And it has evolved in the 21st century, latter 21st century, into long-term housing for low-income citizens, and part of a historic streetscape of Main Street. So really still very historical in telling the stories about our city's history.
And fast forward to what has happened to the hotel. It's been boarded up and has been vacant in recent years, according to the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. What's your sense of the state of this building, at least to the now time?
Well, I think we've always had heritage organizations have always struggled with vacant buildings. They're much more prone to fire and these kinds of problems. So I think we've always advocated that if these buildings aren't being occupied, if they're not being invested in and maintained, this is the kind of fate that they're going to face. And this building, as you know, had a fire in 2023 when it was the final tenants that were there were evacuated. So this clearly is an ongoing issue with vacant buildings, heritage or not.
And people will, if they don't know where 785 Main Street is, when you go down Main Street, you'll essentially see this building. There's a yellow sign that says hotel, but it's essentially colored. There's a mural that has teal color on it.
Yes, I mean, a lot of these buildings want to tell the stories of Indigenous history and the city's history. So there's been a lot of murals put on these buildings to tell the stories. But again, very difficult to protect these vacant buildings. It's been a struggle in this city for a number of years.
What did you hear from the other board members at Heritage Winnipeg? Because you, when we called you, you were just about to step in, and you were kind enough to leave the board meeting to talk about this. But what have you heard from the other folks on the board there?
Well, I think that some of them are sad that this wasn't redeveloped into much-needed low-income housing. We talk about needing spaces and residential spaces for long-term housing, and this would have been a great building for that. So I guess we're talking about the protection of these buildings has to come from a solid business plan on how to reoccupy these buildings. And if that doesn't happen, we're just going to continue to see this.
Do you know who is responsible for ensuring that solid business plan, or ensuring that something like this doesn't happen again? Who is it incumbent upon?
Well, usually the owners, when they purchase a building, there's usually two options. We always say it's to purchase a building to rehabilitate it and get it occupied, or to sell it and get it into somebody else's hands.
Right.
And they're unable to do that.
And so if they're unable to do that, then is there another mechanism that you think folks should consider, or at least the city or the province might consider?
Well, I think the government should have stepped in, because I should say that this building has been for sale several times while it's been vacant, and we're to assume that nothing happened with any sale. So I think given the state of the need for housing, that maybe these existing buildings could be already used as opposed to looking at new developments.
Right. Are there other Sutherland hotels out there, buildings that are in the same state as this hotel that's gone up in flames? Are there other buildings that you think we might learn? I guess the city might learn from this.
Well, I'll give you the breadth of the problem. I believe there is just under 700 vacant buildings in the city. And I don't know what the percentage of them are for the downtown or the Exchange District, but I know that we'd be happy to sit down and talk about the government, and that's all levels of government, I believe, because this is a housing problem for all levels to deal with, to talk about the inventory of vacant buildings and how some of these vacant buildings could be taken over and rehabilitated. As we can see, this is a very chronic problem in our city with vacant buildings and fires. And it will continue until we take this seriously. We need these buildings maintained and looked after. This is indicative of what happens to vacant buildings. So you can see why we're really pushing to get a lot of these buildings divested.
Cindy Tugwell in conversation with Faith Fundell on Up to Speed. Cindy is the Executive Director of Heritage Winnipeg. For more on the Sutherland, as Heather mentioned, we have updated images as well as the demolition is ongoing this morning. You should be able to travel through that area, by the way, but you can go to our website for those images and videos, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Breaking this hour.
CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview. On now.
Well, Monday's the day, Donald Trump's inauguration day, and that means for Canada the possibility of 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. Yesterday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with the premiers in Ottawa to hammer out their strategy. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew spoke briefly after the meeting. He called on Canadians to unite behind the majority of political leaders who are opposed to the Trump tariffs.
Canadian pride is something that we can really lean on right now. And there are few things that unite Canadians more for better and for worse than our neighbor to the south. And so right now, as you see leaders coming together, I think it's a great moment for Canadians to come together as well.
That is Premier Wab Kinew speaking after the meeting. Now, for his take on what came out of the meeting, Jonathan Milloy is here with some analysis, a professor of political science at Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning.
So there's been, let's start here. There's been some criticism that the premiers and the feds have been on the, haven't been rather on the same page in their responses to Trump's tariff threats. Tell me a little bit more about what that looked like after they met.
Well, I have to say, it looked like with one big exception, they were pretty much on the same page. The Prime Minister and all the premiers, except Daniel Smith in Alberta, all were pretty united yesterday. They released a common communique about the need to retaliate with tariffs. There was quite a remarkable uniformity, except for Daniel Smith, who did not sign that communique and still wants oil and gas exempted from any tariffs we might fight back with.
What about strategy to deal with the threat then?
Well, I think that you didn't see anything really, really new yesterday, because the strategy all along has been certainly to consider all kinds of retaliatory tariffs against Mr. Trump. But what really struck me yesterday is just how unified they were. Different political parties, different regions of the country, all speaking with one voice, that tariffs had to be considered at least. Whether they're actually used is another thing. And so that was the uniformity that we've seen building over the last couple of months, but that was really striking to see. But like I said, Daniel Smith was the exception, and she also made that very clear yesterday as well.
Could they have been, I don't know, trying to keep their cards close to their chest maybe and not reveal a lot of details?
Well, I mean, there's a bit of that. I mean, I think one or two premiers said things like, we're everything's on the table for now, but also I said we don't want to show all our cards. Those sorts of metaphors there, and that makes sense. And I think that's not just a negotiating strategy. I think there probably is some disagreement among the premiers on exactly how far to go, what sectors to retaliate with, etc. But those are more tactical decisions, and I can see why they're holding back on that a bit. But I think there is a little disagreement on that part. But on the overall strategy, quite a lot of uniformity.
How constructive was this meeting in your view?
Well, I think it was very useful. I think for all the premiers, two premiers were by video, but everyone else did come to Ottawa yesterday. And again, we didn't learn anything super new there, but I think it was very useful for them to be able to meet, to show that force of unity, and to really ensure that they are on the same page, at least on the big strategy there. So yeah, I think it was worth a day in Ottawa yesterday.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is obviously ahead in the polls, as we've been reporting. There is a good chance we're going to have a spring election. What role should the leader of the opposition be playing in all this, if any?
Well, that's very tricky. As you said, he doesn't have a seat at the table. He's not head of government, so he wasn't there yesterday. But yeah, he is likely to be the next prime minister. And it's I think at this point, when we see so much uniformity among all the premiers, again, different political parties and regions and so on, it's a case where you do look at the other federal parties and ask, well, what can they contribute to that unity? I think particularly in the case, because Alberta is an outlier here, I think the Conservative Party particularly might have a role in trying to bridge that a bit. But Mr. Poilievre was asked about that yesterday, and he didn't have anything to say at the time there. But I think Mr. Poilievre might be able to play a bit of a role because Alberta is offside of the rest of the country, and I think a Conservative Party leader is uniquely positioned to try and work with that.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
That's Jonathan Malloy, a professor in the Department of Political Science at Carleton University. Time right now is 6:26 a.m. and we've got next local news coming up at 6:30. In the forecast, a mix of sun and cloud, chance of flurries late this afternoon, and winds are going to be south 30, gusting to 50 this afternoon, our high -2. The big thing is that we're watching for a winter storm that could be coming in through Winnipeg. It is forecast, but these systems and how they move. This wouldn't be until tonight, bringing heavy snow to regions of the province. Winnipeg, Steinbach, Selkirk, Dougald, Morden included, mostly the southeast corner. Also, we have snowfall warnings for snow that's developing tonight. Could be 15 to 20 centimeters of snow in the areas around Swan River, Poplar, and Grand Rapids, South Central. And then to the north, Paugh, Flon, Norway House could see some snow moving in starting this afternoon and then tonight, so a little earlier than us. Here's the Sunshine Makers on CBC. This tune's called There Is a Light.
Me feel I belong. I can see a light shining so bright. Makes me feel strong. Makes me feel I belong. There's a will, there's a way. 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 I got a firmness, a purpose, the will to just work this. Dedicated doggedness, we better can't logging this. Dangers on the optimist, trying, now we doing this. Destination, no we bust, ain't nobody stopping us. In the can another way, remember what my mom would say. First you don't succeed, try the task differently. This is just mentality, Rudy as reality. Putting myself to get it down like gravity. There's a will, there's a way. There's a will, there's a way. There's a will, there's a way. There's a will, there's a way.
Sunshine Makers and There's a Light, music maybe we all need today as we're waiting to see whether or not that ceasefire deal is in fact going to be inked. So stay tuned. We're going to talk to students this morning, actually, one Palestinian student and also one Israeli student who are going to join us to talk about the impact of the ceasefire deal and what that could mean on their lives and on their families' lives. And of course, it's got such an impact on the world. So stay tuned. That's coming up later. As you've been hearing, though, there are some stalls that have developed this morning. We have business news still ahead on CBC as well. Phil Demont will join us, and he's going to be talking about some more trouble in Canada's retail sector. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is a mild -1, a little bit messy out there. We're in for a mix of sun and clouds today. Still another windy one. Today's high -2, so right about where we are right now. And an Alberta clipper is headed this way. A winter storm watch for southern Manitoba and a snowfall warning for parts of central and northern Manitoba. Well, police and fire crews are still on the scene of yesterday's massive fire at the Sutherland Hotel on Main Street. So are demolition crews this morning. CBC's Aaron Broman is there right now and joins us live. Aaron?
Heather, I'm standing in the median in between north and southbound Main Street, and you can hear that excavator behind me. There's not much left of the Sutherland Hotel. 2 excavators are working on the scene right now and just took down the last 2 windows in the upper level of the hotel. It's been reduced to a pile of rubble, which has just spilled completely into the street. This fire started yesterday afternoon in this building that officials said was vacant and comes just days after a church on Euclid burned. About half a dozen people are standing across the street just watching this happen. Some are saying they can't believe it's already gone. Police have the northbound lanes of traffic blocked, and firefighters are also here on scene while this operation's underway. It's just another building lost to fire on this section of Main Street. Reporting live, Aaron Broman, CBC News.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And we'll be watching that scene as it develops through the day as those demolition crews do their work. A low vacancy rate in the rental market could hamper part of the province's new plan to end homelessness. A piece of the strategy involves encouraging some Manitoba housing tenants to move elsewhere. They would be people who can afford to live in the private market with additional financial support. The goal is to free up their units for transitional or supportive housing for encampment residents. Avram Sharak at the Professional Property Managers Association of Manitoba supports the plan, but says there's already a shortage of private market rental units for people to move into.
They might also ask us to reduce our rents a little bit to make it work. In today's environment, that's a harder bite for a lot of us. We're nice people, but we have a lot of people on waiting lists in many of our properties. So, would we take an extra $100 or $200 off the rent to be good social citizens? Maybe, but I can't promise that.
A recent report from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation shows the vacancy rate for rental units in Winnipeg is 1.7%. The average 2-bedroom suite is currently going for just over $1,500 a month. Well, some Manitoba businesses worry they will be among casualties in a possible trade war with the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to impose a 25% tax on Canadian imports once he takes office. That worries the head of Food and Beverage Manitoba. It represents more than 300 manufacturers in Manitoba's agri-food sector. Michael McUlick says it would be devastating if Trump makes good on that threat. He hopes he can be persuaded to see how much damage a trade war would inflict on both sides of the border.
We need leaders that have the vision and are able to communicate the value of that kind of internationalism. This turn inwards is dangerous for the world. We need strong international relations, and a lot of those are underpinned by trade.
Almost half of all Manitoba's agri-food exports, worth about $4.5 billion, went to the U.S. in 2023. There could be a hiccup in the ceasefire deal between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accusing Hamas of reneging on parts of the agreement in a move to gain further concessions. Netanyahu's office says his cabinet won't meet to approve the agreement until Hamas backs down. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian activists held a rally in Vancouver last night to celebrate the announcement of the ceasefire deal. Nasser Najjar and has family in Gaza, and he says a deal could have been reached sooner.
I cried out of joy. I was angry that this is take place months and months ago, despite it was possible, because at the very end, the exact same proposals, they were signed. So we wasted all of this time for nothing.
You can hear the latest on this story and other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Mark Carney is going to launch his campaign today to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal Party leader and Canada's next Prime Minister. Carney is the former governor of the Bank of Canada. He grew up in Alberta and will announce his bid later today in Edmonton. Tributes continue pouring in for Manitoba's education minister. Nello Altamare passed away Tuesday. The former principal turned politician is being remembered as a man with a larger-than-life personality who dedicated his life to students in the province. Manitoba's Justice Minister, Matt Wiebe, was Altamare's seatmate in the legislature, and they became good friends.
He was just a passionate, strong advocate for his community and for the things that he cared about, most notably education. And as I said, a dear friend, and my condolences are to his family and to the community that he represented.
Altamare took a leave from his ministerial role in October for medical reasons. He was heralded by many as the mayor of Transcona. Nello Altamare was 61. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
You know, Heather, I also just want to say in these, ever increasingly divisive times, watching the outpouring of people's comments on Nello Altamare has, spanned both sides of the aisle. I was reading a comment this morning, a post from Calvin Gertson, a former premier, of course, and long time in cabinet for the PC party, just talking about his relationship with Nello Altamare. And I thought that was heartening. But obviously he was a personally speaking, from all those who know and worked with him, just a wonderful human being gone too soon. So
yeah, absolutely. I loved watching footage of him interacting with children, especially kids, because he was a principal and a school teacher for so long. Yeah. So yeah, he had a nice way to communicate.
Yep. So lovely, obviously, that the legacy is left with them naming the some of the school food program initiatives after him. So, all right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
If you want to read more about that, by the way, you can see all of that on our website. Some of the tributes embedded in our story there about the coverage of his death. So cbc.ca/Manitoba, as I like to remind you during the show. My name is Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio, and Abby Adeyemi is in next with our regional forecast.
Good morning once again. A snowfall warning in parts of central and northern Manitoba as we're tracking that Alberta clipper coming our way. Also, that winter storm watch is in effect for southeastern Manitoba. Looking at conditions today for Winnipeg and surrounding areas, we're seeing temperatures around -1 at this time, mostly cloudy. We should get to about a high of -2 later in the day for the city. We will get to see a mix of sun and clouds, and flurries likely late in the afternoon. Forecast for the Pembina Valley region similar to Winnipeg. Heading west to Brandon, -9 and clear at this time. Today's forecast for the Westman region calls for increasing cloudiness, a slight chance of flurries in the forecast this afternoon, and a risk of freezing rain might be felt in that part of the province. The high for Brandon would be around -1. Darwin is sitting at -9 at this time. Cloudy conditions you're seeing. The Parkland region will see a mix of sun and clouds today. Then it turns to cloudy conditions in the afternoon. A few flurries and possibility of freezing rain in the forecast. The winds will be light this morning, turning breezy from the south in the afternoon. High for folks in that region, you should be around -1 today. For the Interlake region, Current temperatures around -2, mainly cloudy in Gimli at this time. We will see periods of snow starting sometime this afternoon. The winds will pick up from the southeast, becoming breezy. The high for Gimli will be around -3. And then for tonight, temperatures will even drop further. And don't forget that part of the province is also under that winter storm watch as the Alberta Clipper moves in. In the powerful influence surrounding areas, temperatures around -6 at this time. That region will be getting snow today, starting around the noon period. And it's going to be heavier times. We're looking at about 5 centimeters accumulation throughout the day. The high will be around -4, with the wind chill feeling like -12, though that's not something to take into consideration. It's not going to be too cold. However, that snowfall warning remains in effect for not just Flin-Flon. We're going to be seeing about 15 centimeters expected. That's through Friday because it's going to move in. This heavy snow will hit there, so travel might be tricky for that region. In Thompson, we're seeing temperatures around -6, light snowfall in there, and ice crystals in Churchill at this time. The high for that part of the province will reach -13.
I just took a bath because there were so many warnings I had time.
True. Warnings all over the place.
We always joke. It's like either traffic is going to go on because there's so much going on, but today it's all those weather warnings. Pages of them. All right, Abby. Well, we'll get our shovels out again, I guess. And maybe when it gets cold, you can wash your car. I always say that's the bright side. Let's get to the commute. Speaking of the cars and people walking, what's up, May?
So not too big of a commute this morning. It's more weather related. I imagine later today, as some of that storm hits, we'll see some different driving conditions. But currently, right now, we're seeing a lot of slushy conditions. So fill up your windshield washer fluid if you can. Wear big boots if you're commuting by foot. We'll look at a few areas. I'm particularly looking at Highway number 6 out of if you're heading outside of Winnipeg towards St. Laurent area. It's currently covered in snow on Highway number 6, but I'm seeing that the plow just hit the highway. So if you're traveling in that direction, expect to see a plow along the road as well. Looking west, we're looking at Swan River area. It's partially snow covered, but also we're seeing quite a bit of reduced visibility developing right now. Anything else you're seeing in the commute, give me a call and I'll pass the message along. 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, May. We have Phil DeMott filling in for Chris Lee Ramlichan this morning with Business News. Good morning to you, Phil.
Yeah, I can hear the radio switching off as you say that.
Stop. Let's go to Ottawa. They're saying possible tariffs on Canada's oil and gas exports could drive up American gas prices. How much are we talking about?
Yeah, this is John Wilkinson. He's the federal minister for natural resources. Says American drivers, mainly in the Midwest, could see gasoline prices rise by as much as 75 cents a gallon. That's if Donald Trump follows through on his pledge to slap a 25% tariff on Canadian exports into the U.S. Now, that would include exports of oil and natural gas, mainly come from Alberta. Wilkinson was speaking at a conference in Washington over the weekend, and his comments came on the heels of that meeting between Prime Minister Trudeau and the provincial premiers trying to develop a strategy to push back against the tariff plan. The reason for the focus on the Midwest U.S. is because Enbridge, the pipeline system there, it's the largest one in Canada, bit of infrastructure, goes into Chicago, among other Central American destinations. So right now, if you look, just because I did, a gallon of gas at the pump in the Windy City, about $3.50. You're talking $3.75 or more under the tariff regime. That's a fairly big hike considering it's actually just a pen stroke from Donald Trump's pen. Besides oil, Wilkinson also pointed out Canada supplies American industry with a large portion of other minerals, things like uranium and those rare earth minerals key to green technologies. But it's really if you're going to get people's attention, especially south of the border, you're going to do it at the gas pump. So him talking about 75 cents, it's part of the strategy that Ottawa has and the provincial governments, especially Doug Ford over in Ontario, to say, look, here's how your prices are going to go up if you actually follow through in this plan.
Let's go to another story. In the last week, we've been talking in Business News about trouble for stores in Canada, stores like, companies like Ricky's, Clio, and now more trouble in the retail sector, right?
Yeah, this is focused in the outdoor space, but you're right. It's a sign of growing woes in the whole sector. Word this week, the Mountain Equipment Co-op is up for sale. Now, Kingswood Capital, which owns Mountain Equipment, wouldn't confirm anything, but multiple news sources say the outdoor gear company's on the auction block once again. Started in 1971, back when you couldn't really get good outdoor gear, so it was kind of a co-op for people who wanted to go camping, biking, all that kind of stuff, but serious stuff. In 2020, Kingswood, which is a private U.S. private equity company, bought Mountain Equipment for $150 million, and at the time looked like a smart move because the COVID lockdowns, you couldn't do anything indoors, so people were going to do stuff outdoors. Trend, though, looks to be short-lived, so manufacturers and retailers who bulked up now left with tons of inventory they couldn't sell. That's Mountain Equipment's problem. Faces a cash crunch, some indication that suppliers might not be getting paid, and it's not the only one. Last month, Vancouver bike manufacturer Rocky Mountain Bicycles, they filed for creditor protection. Trail bikes weren't selling. And you're right, not the only one. Comark faces looked in bankruptcy protection earlier this month. So that means Clio, Ricky's, chains that were really filling up malls, they're kind of closing. And last month, Stokes, which is sells housewares under the banner Think Kitchen, they fell into bankruptcy. Retail woes, function of the slowing Canadian economy. Right now, TD Bank forecasting that Canadian consumers will increase spending over the next 3 years either 2% or less, and that's not really a big number, especially if you want to support the industry where it is now.
How are the markets looking this morning?
Right now, yesterday was a good day on the Dow, up 700 points, so that's feeding into the market. So France up more than 2%, Hong Kong up 1.25%, all the other markets in positive territory. Oil down 69 cents, $79.34 a barrel. Gold's up $20, $2,739 an ounce. Canadian dollar faltering a bit, down 1/10 cent, trading at 69.64 cents U.S.
All right, Phil, talk to you soon.
Thanks, Marcy.
That's Phil Dumont filling in for Crystalie Ramlakan, live this morning from our CBC with CBC Business News. Well, Halifax singer-songwriter Ria Mae closed out 2024 by releasing some new music. This is her latest single on your Thursday morning. Ria Mae on CBC with Other Side.
There's so many ways I can't fly. Waste time, won't wait for me. I'm mad at your optimism. I'm mad at everything lately. Just watch as it all falls down. Finally lighting up the sky. I'm wasted on everything. I'm wasting all of our time. Not safe in the cell. Took the easy way out. Gonna pay for it now. The pain of this love is the heaviest cross, and the hope it gets better is worse than the loss, yeah. I'm coming around again, I'm searching for water. I wish you would drown me, I'm scared of the other side. So many ways that I fall short. Try hard to make believe. I'm sad at what could have been. I'm sad that all my thoughts hate me. I'm not safe in the cell. There's no easy way out. Gotta pray for me now. The pain of this love is the heaviest cross, and the hope it gets better is worse than the loss, yeah. I'm coming around again, I'm searching for water. I wish you would drown me, I'm scared of the other side. Cross, and the hope it gets better is worse than the loss, yeah. I'm coming around again, I'm searching for water. I wish you would drown me, I'm scared of the other side.
Ria Mae, Another Side on CBC. Hails out of Halifax if you want to support her music. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube.
It's a story of Russia and how Russia has changed for all this period of time.
25 years in power, from the KGB.
Putin thinks he's a brilliant spy.
To the Kremlin.
He was going to crush any sort of opposition in Russia.
How Vladimir Putin got there.
Everything has to be sort of behind closed doors.
And what drives him.
А вы умеете прощать?
Да. Но не все. Предательство.
Putin's journey. Saturday. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Coming up after 7 o'clock on the program this morning, a homeowner who lives near an encampment in Winnipeg is sharing her thoughts about the province's new strategy to tackle homelessness, which includes dismantling encampments one at a time. The strategy called Your Way Home. So we're going to hear from that resident coming up after 7 o'clock here. Right now, it is 11 minutes to 7 a.m. on your Thursday morning. And next on the show, let's go to national and international news. After more than 15 months of conflict, it does look like Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire deal to pause the war in Gaza, but the deal is not yet official. Israel is delaying a cabinet vote on the deal, saying that Hamas already has violated parts of the agreement. So this is developing this morning, this story. The ceasefire is supposed to come into effect Sunday and see both Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners released. And to talk about where we're at, Rex Brynan is here, professor of political science at McGill University. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what is the latest this morning in terms of the sticking points?
So as you say, the Israeli cabinet has delayed a vote. That appears to be a difference of opinion with Hamas over exactly which Palestinian security prisoners would be released as part of the deal. Although the deal was announced yesterday, the negotiations were still ongoing. So there were still things that had to be agreed in terms of fine details. So I think part of it is simply a difference of opinion between two sides as to what the wording means, but also there is a little bit of resistance in Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet on the far right. There are political parties and the coalition who actually want the war to continue and are trying to get him to agree that the ceasefire will only go to phase one, then Israel will exit the ceasefire and restart the war. So part of it is cabinet and coalition management too. But I think nonetheless, in the end, the Israeli cabinet will endorse the deal the next day or two.
I was going to ask you, how confident are you that this will go to a vote and be approved?
I think it will. I think it's more likely that it will than it won't. But then it is a complex deal that holds over 3 months and 3 parts. So there's agreement on part one, which is some hostages released, some prisoners released, some withdrawal, and a temporary ceasefire. Phase two is the rest of the hostages released, more prisoners released, a full Israeli withdrawal, and a permanent ceasefire. The negotiations of that haven't even begun. They don't begin until partway through phase one, and then phase three is about reconstruction of Gaza. So there's a lot that still has to happen in the coming days and weeks and months, and the agreement doesn't at all address who runs Gaza. What kind of administration is placed in Gaza? That's not addressed at all in the deal. So that issue remains unresolved too.
Last night, outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden gave his final address to the nation, and he talked about this. He made it clear in his speech, in his view, that his administration, he talked about the role his administration played in getting to this point. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is already calling the ceasefire a victory for his incoming administration. Both obviously played some role and will play a role going forward. But can you elaborate on what the role was for the United States and others in this deal happening?
So the U.S. has been a mediator from the outset, as have the Qataris, as have the Egyptians. I actually think that Donald Trump can claim a little bit of credit for this one. This is essentially the same deal that the Biden administration put on the table in May of last year and was unable to secure Israeli agreement. And that was largely because the Biden administration was not putting any effective pressure on Israel. The incoming Trump administration had said it absolutely wanted the fighting over before it took power. That was largely framed as a threat against Hamas, but it was directed at Israel too. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu was both hoping to curry favor with the incoming Trump administration, but also a bit worried about their response if he continued to drag his feet. And so in many ways, the fact that it took this long and the deal is only being agreed at the very end of the Biden administration is a real indictment of the failures of the Biden administration in bringing an end to this conflict.
He's widely unpopular when you look at the polling, the exit polling, how Americans view his term in office. We'll see what history will say about everything that's been going on in the States. Interesting times, right? I wonder. Back to Gaza, though, in the Middle East, how will the next few days play out? Like, what's the stress of the next few days as we see people on the ground in these countries, starting to celebrate, the world starting to breathe out? It's not a done deal, as you said.
Yeah, no. I mean, there's no ceasefire. Even if it's approved, there's no ceasefire to the weekend. So people are dying. In the last 48 hours, about 70 to 80 people, most of them civilians, have died in Gaza. So, the war is still continuing right now. Then you have to get to phase one. It's complicated. It's technical. There's all kinds of scope for differing interpretations. Phase one has to happen. Then you have to get to phase two. Phase two is actually the negotiations on a permanent ceasefire. As I said, there are some in Israel who don't want a ceasefire. They want the war to continue after phase one, for Israel to withdraw from the process after phase one. So that has to happen. Again, a lot of more complicated technical stuff. The issue of who runs Gaza is completely unaddressed in the negotiations. There's the massive humanitarian challenge. The agreement calls for Palestinians to be allowed to go back to northern Gaza, the Gaza city, but much of Gaza has been destroyed. Reconstruction is daunting. Israel's in the process of trying to shut down the main humanitarian agency that works in Gaza, UNRWA. So there's lots of difficult stuff in the days and weeks and months ahead. And then, of course, this is just a ceasefire agreement. This in no way addresses the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I have zero hope that will occur during the Trump administration. I don't think the Trump administration will care about that at all, and some of its incoming nominees hold very extreme views. Its incoming designate of U.S. ambassador to Israel, its incoming defense secretary, essentially believe that Israel should permanently occupy the Palestinians and deny them political rights in perpetuity, which is hardly a recipe for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So lots has to happen over the next 3 months in this ceasefire, and then, of course, none of that resolves some of the really big issues that got us to this place in the first place.
Thanks for the analysis, Rex. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We're going to get more on World Report in minutes here, but Rex Brynan has been with us, professor of political science at McGill University. So in advance of local headlines and national and international news, why don't we have a quick look just briefly at this Alberta Clipper, just to remind you, it is moving into Manitoba, so it's going to it brings snowfall warnings with it. That is for parts of central Manitoba and southern Manitoba. It does include, central Manitoba and northern Manitoba for the snowfall warnings, 15 to 25 centimeters. And then that winter storm watch is because of the Clipper as well. That's for southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg. Here's how it's going to move. It is likely to move to the north first, and then we might see it developing through the south. The snow is going to start this afternoon and into tonight, and then the snowfall warning really for Winnipeg overnight. We'll see how we fare in this or whether or not it changes track. But it's this Clipper moving into the province that will affect us. I'll get into today's actual forecast in moments. Right now, though, Heather is here with our headlines. Good morning again.
Good morning. Well, some Manitoba businesses worry they will be among casualties in a possible trade war with the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, of course, vowed to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian imports when he takes office. That worries a number of businesses. We're going to hear coming up a little bit more about that. And tributes continue pouring in for Manitoba's education minister. Nello Altamare passed away Tuesday. The former principal turned politician is being remembered as a man with a larger-than-life personality who dedicated his life to students in this province. We're going to hear some memories from his fellow cabinet minister, Justice Minister Matt Wiebe. That's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the forecast for today, then, a mix of sun and cloud, a 60% chance of late-day flurries. Winds will be 30, gusting to 50. That should calm down this afternoon a little bit, maybe, but no, actually, it looks like the gusts are going to continue this afternoon. A high of -2, and with wind chill, it could feel like -12 this morning while you're waiting for the bus or walking. If you need us on the morning drive or walk, give us a call, please. 788-3093. Nothing serious to report at this hour, but to update us if we're missing something, please. Let's get to what's coming up the next hour of the show. What is the city's role in the new strategy to end chronic homelessness? And how is the change going in terms of snow clearing after storms? So we're going to ask Mayor Scott Gillingham about that. He's going to be in studio for our monthly interview. Also in the next hour, speaking of the homelessness strategy, we're going to hear from a resident who lives across from an encampment on the banks of the Red River for her perspective on what the province and the city have announced here. And then we have a lovely story about flowers and art. You might have heard that the Leaf has the beautiful exhibit on right now. We're going to meet one of the local florists creating the colorful work of art made of fresh flowers that is going on there. So stay tuned for that and more. It's all coming up in the next hour of Information Radio. And I always like to say the name of the exhibits, so I just have to find it. No, I'm not going to come up with it. I apologize. Stay tuned. World Report's next.
Today on The Current.
At the Kremlin's Grand Palace, Vladimir Putin was sworn in for his 5th term as president.
It has been 25 years since Vladimir Putin came to power in Russia. At first, he was seen as a reformer, but soon he was crushing dissent in that country and provoking Western powers. Putin's story coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal is on hold. Israel's security cabinet was going to meet this morning to approve the deal, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas reneged on parts of the original document and needs to back down. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has the latest from Jerusalem.
The fate of the hostages has always been a hot-button issue in Israel's parliament, and that's where the new ceasefire deal is going for approval. Calling it a terrible deal and a catastrophe, two of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition partners, hardline far-right parties who want fighting to continue, are threatening to leave him if the ceasefire goes ahead. But even before it reaches the Knesset, last-minute disagreements between Israel and Hamas have held up ratification. Netanyahu blames Hamas for reneging on details. Hamas says it's abiding by the agreement.
The entire world has failed us.
Hostage relatives like Adam Mahanet say Israeli politicians have acted too slowly to get a deal, but the international community should also have cracked down on Hamas long ago.
We might have had them released a lot sooner, and the devastation that has been wrought on Gaza as a result of the Hamas atrocities may have been averted as well.
Palestinian activist politician Mustafa Barghouti says the deal isn't a solution, but must be a first step toward solving long-term problems for the Palestinians.
We have to deal with the core problem, allowing Palestinians to be free from occupation, from oppression, allowing us to have democracy, to have prosperity. This is what we are aiming for. And I think this deal can lead to a change, yes.
The ceasefire may lead to the release of hostages, but it's also set off much debate. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Mark Carney says he's a Liberal outsider, but one with the skills to lead the party. And today, the former Bank of Canada governor could formally launch his campaign. He's expected to make the announcement in Edmonton, a city that right now has just one Liberal riding. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, Edmonton, why is Carney kicking off his campaign in Alberta?
Marcia, let's say you were a brand new Liberal leader, you didn't have a seat in the House of Commons, and you were looking for a safe place to run. Well, Alberta ain't it. Edmonton is, though, where Carney grew up. And launching a political bid, well, that's all about storytelling. So, well, yes, he has headed up the central bank in 2 G7 economies. And yes, he moves in powerful circles, lives in a posh Ottawa neighborhood now. But he was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. His dad once ran, unsuccessfully, for the Liberals in Edmonton back in Pierre Trudeau's day. The endorsements have begun, including from members of the current Liberal caucus, who aren't the be-all, end-all of winning this race. Votes from registered Liberals in ridings not currently held by a Liberal count just as much, but MPs bring organizational teams. One of them, Parm Bains, is going to be hosting an event for Carney in Greater Vancouver tonight. Immediately after this launch, MP George Chahal from Calgary was out spreading the word about this launch earlier this week. But if Carney was hoping to run in the only Edmonton seat currently held by a Liberal, well, that gets awkward because Randy Boissonneau was out on social media yesterday announcing he intends to run again. And Boissonneau's endorsing Chrystia Freeland.
All right. Well, speaking of Freeland, what about her launch plans?
She was out on her social feed yesterday, too, saying she's spending hours making calls, would have more to announce soon. Freeland did receive the endorsement of Health Minister Mark Holland yesterday, who confirmed he is running again the 905 and is going to lace up to fight in her corner. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson will also be speaking to reporters this morning on the heels of fighting for Canada's interests in Washington this week. He's still on the fence about a leadership bid.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer lays flowers at a memorial honoring fallen Ukrainian soldiers in Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is by his side. Starmer is in Kyiv today to sign a new security and trade pact with Ukraine. It's meant to boost military cooperation between Ukraine and the United Kingdom in the Baltic and Black Seas and deter Russia. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden delivered his final address from the White House last night. And while he did not mention Donald Trump by name, Biden appeared to suggest the president-elect represents a dangerous movement in American political history.
An oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead.
Trump will be sworn in as the 47th president of the United States on Monday. Police in South Africa say 87 dead bodies have now been pulled from an abandoned gold mine. Officers are wrapping up their operation to rescue hundreds of illegal miners. They have been trapped deep underground in a mine southwest of Johannesburg. Late last year, police and provincial officials started to cut off food, water, and other supplies. It was part of an operation to stop illegal mining at the site. Some miners died from starvation and dehydration. Police say more than 240 people were pulled out alive. All the survivors have been arrested. The weather has offered a small reprieve for firefighters in California. High winds that were expected to fan flames never arrived, but the large Palisades and Eaton wildfires are still burning. Steve Futterman has the latest from Los Angeles.
For the first time in more than a week, Los Angeles and surrounding areas are a bit relaxed. The two major fires continue to burn, but they are not expanding. And finally, the weather conditions have taken a dramatic shift. LA got the break it needed on Wednesday. Powerful Santa Ana winds were predicted. LA County Fire Chief Anthony Maroney delivered the good news.
The anticipated 70-mile-an-hour winds have yet to materialize.
This is one time people are happy the weather forecast was wrong. The National Weather Service has lifted its particularly dangerous situation warning, and offshore breezes are now in the forecast. That will bring moisture and raise relative humidity. Fire crews both on the ground and from the air are set to begin a new offensive. They expect to make progress. For many, however, like this man, it's far too late. Thousands of families have lost their homes.
When you stare at your front door that's gone, and you have the few moments to contemplate, what does this really mean to my life? I mean, I still don't fully understand everything I have is gone.
There are also new questions being asked about how officials here responded to the fire. The LA Times reports that when the fires first broke out last week, the LA Fire Department did not initially employ all personnel available. The fire chief says LA was following established procedures. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
One of the key organizers of the 2022 Convoy protests will learn today if he'll serve time. Pat King is being sentenced today. He was convicted of 5 criminal charges related to the protest that brought Ottawa to a standstill. The CBC's David Fraser has the details.
Thousands of protesters and hundreds of vehicles converged in Ottawa in early 2022, bringing the city to a standstill. Nearly 3 years later, a key player in the Convoy protests is expecting his sentence. Pat King was found guilty of 5 charges, including mischief and disobeying a court order. The Crown is pushing for a significant penalty, the maximum sentence of 10 years. In its ruling, the Ontario Superior Court found King wasn't just along for the ride, saying that he led the convoy, personally directing activities, and used his social media as a rallying tool.
I've been able to sleep for 10 days.
Videos entered as evidence showed King telling truckers to ignore a court injunction banning horn use,
Horns every half hour,
organizing a slow roll near the Ottawa airport, and helping block Wellington Street.
We moved in 80 trucks last night.
While he avoided 3 intimidation-related charges, the judge ruled King's leadership in the protests was criminal. Justice Charles Hacklin noted King didn't make violent threats or call for property damage, but his actions disrupted the city and left a lasting impact. After his conviction, King's lawyer, Natasha Calvino, said her client had already spent enough time behind bars.
To be asked for a period of probation. Do we follow?
The 2022 protests ended after the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time. Last January, the federal court ruled the use of the measure was unconstitutional. The government is appealing that decision. David Fraser, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown with our team at the show. Kevin and May and Abby behind the glass. Heather Wells in our news center, and a storm coming. We do actually have a storm coming. We're going to talk more about that, but it's not going to affect Winnipeg until tonight. So your forecast in just a minute here. Coming up this hour on the program, we are going to speak with Mayor Scott Gillingham about a number of issues. It's our monthly interview. If you hear these, I always try to get a whole bunch of updates into the stories, into the show rather. One of the things we'll certainly be asking about is what the city's role is in the new strategy to end chronic homelessness. Also, we'll be asking about the vacant lots on Main Street. One more this morning, as the Sutherland Hotel burned and is being demolished as we speak. So how do you make that stretch of Winnipeg, Main Street, more attractive to developers, especially given the needs for housing? So stay tuned. Our conversation with Mayor Scott Gillingham is coming up. In addition to a special place, we're going to take you to Fleur de Ville Artiste, and that is coming up at 7:40. CBC's community reporter Shanley Vidal got a preview there with one of the artists to catch all of the beauty that is going on with that display at the Leaf. So stay tuned, we'll have that. Right now, speaking of Heather Wells, let's build on other stories now. She's here with our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, yes, you're right. The Sutherland is coming down. Demolition crews moved in early this morning after that massive fire at the vacant boarded-up hotel yesterday afternoon. This morning, as that building is being reduced to rubble, police and fire crews are still on the scene. Main Street traffic is still impacted. Southbound lanes are open, while northbound Main is still closed between Higgins and Jarvis. Some Manitoba housing tenants may be offered money by the province so they can afford to switch to housing in the private market. It is one of the province's ideas in a new plan to end homelessness. The idea is to free up the existing social housing units for transitional or supportive housing for people who are now living in encampments. We're going to hear from the head of the Professional Property Managers Association of Manitoba about that and about our low vacancy and how this might be a challenge. That's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Abby now for some details on those weather warnings and our actual forecast today. Hi, Abby.
Hi, Marcy. Good morning once again to you listening out there. For today, we're looking at a mix of snow and chilly temperatures as that Alberta Clipper sweeps into the province, and it will be bringing challenging weather, particularly in central and parts of central and northern parts of the province. But for Winnipeg right now, -2. Today's forecast says we'll see a mix of sun and clouds with a few flurries expected later in the afternoon. The winds would start light, then it gets breezy as they shift from the northwest to the south. Our high for today will be -2, and we are already there. Tonight, some cloudy conditions will be felt, and that flurries will continue into the evening as the winds will peak off. We'll definitely see a shift to the west with the gust. Now, that winter storm, yes, winter storm is in effect for southeastern Manitoba, which includes Winnipeg and surrounding areas. That will start overnight into Friday. Heavy snow is expected, strong winds, and temperatures will be dropping, and that could lead to like blizzard-like conditions. And then in the central parts of the central region and the northern part of the province, we have that snow warning in effect, which will be sweeping in this afternoon. So in summary, it's going to be tomorrow is going to be eventful.
That is like perfectly stated. Yeah.
Because if you're commuting on the highways tomorrow, brace for except it misses us. But what I see, what I'm tracking,
we don't know how much
it's coming already.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to say, just before we turn our attention to traffic, Mae McKillop is here. Hi, Mae.
Hi.
I am really looking forward to Fleur de Ville Artiste. I didn't get there last year. This is at the Leaf, and they cover the mannequins with all the flowers, and they represent different, sometimes different places, different pieces of art. And I'm so excited. Did either of you see it?
I missed it last year, but this year I will. It's already on my list. Like, okay, to do.
Yeah,
I
me
have
too.
to. It's warm in there, so I'm going to be there.
Yeah, there is that too.
For one reason, that's my warm spot.
Yeah.
Across the province. Yeah.
Did you go, Mae?
I didn't go last year, but I have to say I make flower art. I don't think you know this about me.
Okay.
So I really missed it last year with either live flowers or dried flowers. So I'm really curious to see how they piece it together and how they kind of weave together the different cultural influences into them. I think I'm going to go tomorrow. I have the day off.
What do you do with your flower art? Do you do it on mannequins, or do you do it on flat pages? Or?
What I've done in the past, I'll show you some photos later, but what I've done in the past is dried flowers and kind of making different collages, shapes and artistic kind of things out of that. But also, and I actually did this yesterday, I take live flowers and I go and I build mandalas in the snow.
Oh.
So I did that yesterday along the Red River.
I love that. I did not know that about you.
No.
I worked at a florist to partially pay my tuition when I was going through college and university. And I just used to walk into the coolers just for the smell of the flowers as they were being delivered and stand there. And it was glorious.
I bet that's so calming.
Absolutely glorious. Yeah. It was. I've always loved flowers, but I'm kind of become nerdy. Like I'll research them now. I've got all the plant and flower apps, and when we go away, I'll be like, look. I was in California in December, and it was like, look, that's what this flower is supposed to look like. It grows this big in Manitoba, but it's huge there, right? Yeah.
Are you going to go, Mars?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely on the list. Just don't know when. Maybe I'll go with Abby. So apparently all of us have it on our bucket list. Okay, let's get into what's happening in the commute. I interrupted us to talk flowers, but there are a couple of things to mention.
Priorities, flowers there, hey? Looking at the commute, though, as we heard in the news, just echoing the demolition of the Sutherland Hotel has begun. So yesterday there were some commute tips on that. Today I'll update everyone. The northbound Main between Higgins and Jarvis is closed currently. The southbound lanes are open as well. Anything else going on in the city, let me know. I'll take a quick look at the highways. If you're heading out of the city, northeast towards Lac du Bonnet, there's some snow-covered conditions, as well as northwest along Highway number 6 towards St. Laurent. They're snow covered, but the plows have been moving through, and I can see it's almost on its way back to the city. As well, looking south from Winkler to Boissevain, there's some partly covered conditions. And then if we go look north, we can see there's a fair bit of reduced visibility, and these are highways between Swan River, Grand Rapids, and all the way up to Flin Flon. I'll be keeping an eye on the condition throughout the show this morning. If there's anything that you wanted to let me know about, please give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, the time right now is 7:17 on your Thursday morning. And as we've been reporting, the province has unveiled this big plan to tackle homelessness. It does involve going to encampments. And they say helping people find housing with wraparound supports, but effectively dismantling encampments. The call to dismantle them has been welcome news to some Winnipeggers. Lori Nealon is one of them. She lives on Waterfront Drive, where there have been multiple encampments pop up over the last year. She spoke yesterday with the CBC's Jim Agapito.
Lori Nealon. I live in the East Exchange District. Well, I along with almost everybody else in the neighborhood, was thrilled with the announcement. It's exactly what we have been advocating for going on five years now. Helping people up and out of the encampments rather than perpetuating and sustaining them in the encampments. Our experience here has been generally good. I personally have met a few of the people that live in the encampments. The issue with the encampments, of course, is the crime, the drug use, growing addiction and mental health issues that are associated with that kind of lifestyle. So it's a problem in terms of also the environment, because this area is a protected urban forest, and the forest has been decimated by trees being cut and burned. Also, all of the garbage, the garbage the amounts are epic. Personally, what we have seen are people from the encampments using drugs on the streets, on the sidewalk. A woman overdosed in front of the Mir Hotel here on Waterfront Drive, revived by paramedics. I mean, it's just that kind of thing that should not be happening in any neighborhood in the city. And that's why we were so happy to hear the Premier's announcement that he agrees people should be in housing. They should be getting help for their addictions and their illnesses, whether that's physical or mental. They should not be left by the wayside to wither away on the riverbank. We've had to, all of the residences and in the neighborhood have spent tens of thousands of dollars to up the security of the buildings, because people were getting into the buildings, camping out in the main common areas. There was theft. So yeah, that's the impact. It's an ambitious plan. It'll be a difficult plan to orchestrate because there are so many factors involved. But I think the Premier is really very committed and serious about this is no longer acceptable. And I think he's going to pull out the stops and do whatever he can to make sure that what he said is going to happen does happen.
You've had interactions with some of the people living in encampments. What has that been like? Could you tell us?
Well, generally, they always are interested in telling you their story, and I'm interested in hearing their stories. And often we will ask, what can we do? What can we do to help you? And we have tried some of them to get them connected with the service organizations and so on. So, generally it's been positive. I'm optimistic. I feel vindicated on behalf of all the residents of this neighborhood who have been asking, pleading with the city government and most recently the provincial government, please help these people up and out of the encampments, and please remediate our neighborhood. Let us have our neighborhood back to enjoy.
That was Lori Nealon, who lives on Waterfront Drive. She had a conversation on the banks of the river with CBC's Jim Agapito yesterday. As mentioned, we're going to talk about the city's role specifically in this new strategy plan to take on homelessness and increase housing in the province and in the city of Winnipeg. We'll talk about it with the mayor coming up on the show.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
7:23 a.m. the time right now, and to international news next about something that the world is watching. A viral outbreak in China is making international headlines, once again worrying some about the threat of another pandemic. Now, unlike COVID-19, experts say that human metapneumovirus, I'm going to say this right, metapneumovirus, resembles the common cold, and the World Health Organization says a winter surge is not unusual. This week on CBC's The Dose podcast, infectious diseases specialist Dr. Sachin Takaya explains what human metapneumovirus infection is, and also offers some advice about how we can better communicate about the disease outbreaks that are happening abroad.
Looking at the reports, and I think there's quite a bit of media out there about human metapneumovirus, and they all have the same message, not to panic, that it's the expected rates. So I think we see the visuals coming out, right, of health centers that are overcrowded with people wearing masks. And I think there's this fear out there that we don't want to go through a pandemic again. Like, we all have very bad memories of the pandemic. Many of us do. But despite those images, it's important to know that that's a usual. It's not out of the usual. COVID was out of the usual. But this is people being in health centers, and we're seeing the same thing in Saskatoon too. We have lots of people coming in with what we call ILIs or influenza-like illnesses because they're sicker than they normally are. But that goes up every winter. It's not unexpected. And so there's a lot of focus on China, I think, because that's where, SARS-CoV-2 came from. And so there's a little bit of fear around there, but it's important to remember this is, despite what the images show, what's happening there is what happens every year. So I don't think there's anything special happening. I think it's the fear that's driving that attention. It's like any other cold virus. I'm not sure if it was rhinovirus or if we named that a fancy name, whether it would get the same sort of attention. I think it would get the attention because it was China, but really there's nothing out of the ordinary happening there right now.
So Dr. Sachin Takaya, Clinical Associate Professor and Division Head of Infectious Diseases at the University of Saskatchewan College of Medicine. You can hear her full interview on The Dose with Dr. Brian Goldman. You can catch the show on CBC Listen or on your favorite podcast app anytime. 7:26 is coming up, and that means that we better get to Scott Regehr, who's here with Morning Sports. Hi, Scott.
Happy Friday, Junior.
Yeah, exactly. Let's start in the NHL, where the Jets are back in action tonight after that big win over the Canucks.
Yeah, and now they'll take on another West Coast foe, the Seattle Kraken. Depending on the outcome of other games tonight, the Jets, Marcy, could actually find themselves back atop the NHL. One of the reasons for the Jets' success so far this season, of course, is that incredible power play. Almost a third of the time, Winnipeg gets a man advantage, they score. It's led to plaudits from rival coaches like Detroit's Todd McLennan, Vancouver's Rick Tocchet. Jets assistant coach Davis Payne, who runs the power play, says that while the praise from fellow coaches is nice, it isn't all great.
There's two sides of that. I mean, what do they say? Imitation is the biggest form of flattery. It's one thing, but then at the same time, you don't want anybody copying what you're having some success doing. And so when you see other teams, other groups doing some similar things, it's sort of like, maybe the cat's out of the bag, maybe it isn't. But so far, the results have been good.
Well, the Seattle Kraken, tonight's opponents have one of the worst penalty kills in the league, so perhaps some more power play goals for the Jets. Puck drop is at 7 o'clock.
Let's go to tennis. What's the latest from the Australian Open?
Well, two more Canadians have bowed out down under Marcy. Denis Shapovalov and Gabriel Diallo both lost, which means there's no one left from the country in men's singles. Still one hope in the women's draw, though. That's Laval's Leila Annie Fernandez, who takes on third-ranked Coco Gauff in the wee hours of tomorrow morning. Meantime, an unsettling incident where Ons Jabeur is concerned, Marcy. The former world number 2 was seen slumping in her chair this morning, coughing and pointing at her chest in distress. She wiped away tears before she left the court for a medical timeout. Now, Jabeur returned and beat her Colombian opponent, although she looked far from her best.
When I was younger, I was diagnosed with asthma, so having to cough a lot didn't help. I think it did provoke it even more. But yeah, it is very tough to play. I had to kind of not play long rallies, not the best opponent when you're in this condition. But I apologize at the end of the match because I really don't want to behave like this on the court.
Jabeur, who is bidding to become both the first African and the first Arab woman to win a major, says she's still not 100%, and that goes beyond her asthma flare-ups. The Tunisian is trying to come back from shoulder surgery, which looked like it might lead to an early retirement for her. As it is, though, Jabeur gets ready to face an American, Emma Navarro, in the next round.
And to basketball, where, wait for it, the Raptors are on a winning streak.
2 triumphs in a row. Heady stuff for Toronto, Marcy. But all jokes aside, this latest win, last night's win, is raising some eyebrows because it was against none other than the Celtics, the defending NBA champions. And for those going, well, who is in the lineup? Full strength, including the superstar Jason Tatum. This same team, remember, beat Toronto on New Year's Eve by 54. That's the worst defeat in Toronto history. And Raptors guard Davion Mitchell was asked whether that humiliating game was on their minds last night.
I even told him, bro, we owed them. We're not just going to get blown out and just lay down just because they're a really good team, just because they won a championship. No, we're going to make a push even harder. We're going to be more physical. I'm kind of glad I got those 2 fouls at the beginning to set the tone. We're going to be physical throughout this game. They can't call every foul. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing about people don't understand. They can't call everyone. We're going to be physical, and we're just going to be the more hard-playing team. I think that's what we did.
Yeah, Mitchell, who filled in for the injured point guard Emmanuel Quickly last night, chipped in 10 points, and as you heard right there, a couple of pretty hard fouls to boot. So the Raptors, they might not be good this season, Marcy. They've lost 3 times as many games as they have won, but at least they're not going down without a fight. Last night, almost literally so.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott. Talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good.
That is Scott Reguer live on CBC with Morning Sports. It is coming up to news time at 7:30 in the morning drive commute. Please let us know if there's any major problems out there. 788-3093. Of course, the weather, always something to watch for with slick conditions. But you can always call us on the commuter line if you have updates. The mayor's going to be here in the next half hour for our monthly interview. We have much to cover. We will be asking what is going on with LeMay Forest out in St. Norbert. So that's on the table today. We're also going to be asking how the proposed snow clearing pilot project for next winter is going and whether there's news there. We understand there might be something to update. So he's going to be in studio with us. Stay here. That's after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -2, and that's pretty much where our temperature is going to stay through the day. Mix of sun and clouds today. A very good chance we'll see late-day flurries. It's going to be another windy day in Winnipeg. And an Alberta Clipper is about to play the weather spoiler. A winter storm watch has been issued for southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, with snow and blowing snow beginning tomorrow, creating reduced visibility and treacherous driving. And it is a snowfall warning for parts of central and northern Manitoba. Between 15 and 20 centimeters of snow expected beginning tonight into Friday. Well, while a few passers-by watched, demolition crews started to level the Sutherland Hotel. Backhoes this morning tearing up what is left of the fire-ravaged Main Street Hotel. The hotel was vacant when it went up in flames yesterday afternoon. At one point, huge flames shot out the windows on the 3rd floor of the boarded-up building. The Sutherland opened in 1882. That's according to the Manitoba Historical Society. And now it is reduced to rubble. The fire shut down Main Street yesterday, but this morning Winnipeg police say southbound Main is open. However, northbound lanes are still blocked on Main between Higgins and Jarvis. A low vacancy rate in the rental market could hamper part of the province's new plan to end homelessness. A piece of the strategy involves encouraging some Manitoba housing tenants to move elsewhere. They would be people who can afford to live in the private market with additional financial support. The goal is freeing up their units for transitional or supported housing for people who now are in encampments. Avram Sharak is with the Professional Property Managers Association of Manitoba. He supports the plan, but says there's already a shortage of private market rental units for people to move into.
They might also ask us to reduce our rents a little bit to make it work. In today's environment, that's a harder bite for a lot of us. We're nice people, but we have a lot of people on waiting lists in many of our properties. So, would we take an extra 100 or 200 off the rent to be good social citizens? Maybe, but I can't promise that.
A recent report from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation shows the vacancy rate for rental units in Winnipeg is 1.7%. The average two-bedroom suite is currently going for just over $1,500 a month. An expert in finance says Donald Trump's tariff threats are already hurting Manitoba businesses. The U.S. president-elect has vowed to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports as soon as he takes office. Soo-Yik Ao is an associate professor of finance at the University of Manitoba. He says the prospect of tariffs is causing some businesses that rely on exports to delay investment, scale back orders, and reduce staff hours. And Ao says Canada has to retaliate if Trump makes good on his threat.
Nobody wins in a tariff war. Like many wars, nobody wins. It's a question of who loses the most. And we need to make sure that it's clear to Mr. Trump that if there is going to be some sort of conflict like this, he's going to lose more than we will.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Manitoba's Premier Rob Canoe, and 11 other premiers signed a communique yesterday pledging to do all they can to stop the U.S. from imposing punitive tariffs on Canadian goods. The Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal is on hold this morning. Israel's Security Cabinet was going to meet to approve the deal, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas reneged on parts of the original document and needs to back down. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney is expected to enter the federal Liberal leadership race today. An event is scheduled for Edmonton, which Carney considers his hometown. He was born in the Northwest Territories but moved to Edmonton as a 6-year-old. As for former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, it is believed she will launch her leadership bid in coming days. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Politicians and educators across the province are paying tribute to Education Minister Nello Altamare. The NDP MLA died Tuesday. Altamare is being remembered for striving to improve the lives of Manitoba students. Fellow cabinet member Justice Minister Matt Wiebe became a close friend and colleague. He says Altamare's loss is a big one.
He's an amazing man, very strong, and very well liked, and he's a good friend to me. But ultimately, his legacy will live on with the school nutrition program and the other work that he did.
Last fall, Premier Rob Canoe announced new legislation to put the province's universal school food program into law, which will be known as Nello's Law. Nello Altamare was 61 years old. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It's time for our forecast now with Abby Adiemi.
We're looking at varying conditions today across board. Snowfall warnings in effect for parts of central and northern Manitoba, where we have that winter storm watch in effect for southeastern Manitoba. That includes Winnipeg here, and that should be hitting us later. But for Winnipeg, we are at -2 now. That's where our high would be for today. We should see a mix of sun and clouds today. Somewhere in between some flurries by late afternoon. Winds will be light first, then becoming breezy later in the day. We'll see that high just stay where our current temperature is. And then tonight, it's going to remain cloudy. Those flurries would hang back and temperatures would get to -1, though the wind chill is going to change. And then we should be expecting the system moving in. In western Manitoba, Brandon sitting at -10 at this time. Clear skies we are seeing. Expect increasing cloudiness as you get into your day. We do have a slight chance of a flurries this morning and a risk of freezing rain to come with that. So if you're making your commute in the Brandon region, it might be tricky on the roads. We'll see highs around -1. In the Parkland region, Dauphin sitting at -6. It is clear there. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds in that part of the province. Then it turns cloudy in the afternoon. A few flurries. There's going to be, a slight chance of a freezing rain being felt and a high of -1. In the Interlake region, we're seeing Gimli at -2. Periods of snow expected this afternoon. The winds will become breezy, high of -3. The PA, we have that snowfall warning in effect. Currently temperatures at -6. Thompson at -6 and Churchill at -21 with ice crystals. So in Winnipeg right now, -2. That's where our high will be for today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Mae McKillop now, May continues to fill in for Corey this week and has what's going on in our commute.
Well, as we heard in the news, the demolition of the Sutherland Hotel has begun this morning. So northbound Main between Higgins and Jarvis is closed, but the southbound lanes along Main are open. Nothing else to report in the city that I'm hearing so far, but taking a look outside of the city at our highways, if we go northeast towards Lac du Bonny area, we've seen some snow-covered conditions all morning. I can see the plows are moving along there as well. Similar with northwest along Highway number 6 towards St. Laurent. Snow-covered conditions there as well. And a lot along the southern side of the province, we're seeing partly covered conditions with some blowing snow and a bit of reduced visibility in some areas. And then looking north towards Swan River, we're seeing some reduced visibility due to blowing snow conditions and a little bit of snow-covered conditions, but plows are along their way. And that's moving from about Swan River all the way north to Grand Rapids and up to Flin Flon as well. Anything else you're seeing out there on the commute, I'd love to hear about it. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks very much, Mae. Well, let's get to something beautiful now, because starting today, people can head over to Assiniboine Park and you can see some one-of-a-kind floral creations. For a preview, we sent CBC Manitoba's community reporter, Shannalee Vidal, to check it out.
Artistic floral creations are on display in Winnipeg. Mannequins have been intricately adorned with colorful, fresh flowers inspired by Manitoba's art scene. We got a preview of Fleur de Ville Artiste at the Leaf. My name is Tina Barclay. I'm one of the co-founders of Fleur de Ville, and I have the best job on the earth. We produce luxury flower shows all over the world, and we're thrilled to be back here in Winnipeg at the Leaf for our second annual flower show. We work with local florists in each city. So we have brought together 16 of Winnipeg's finest florists to showcase their talent, and we've partnered them up with a different cultural institution here in Winnipeg, because this series this year is called Artiste. So we're bringing to life orchestras, symphonies, ballets, plays, all sorts of different kinds of arts, telling stories through flowers, not just showing pretty flowers, but telling the stories. It's like floral theater. So one of my favorites that has just been finished is a female trumpet player, and you'll see her in her suit, her power suit, with her botanical trumpet in her hand. You'll see a ballerina that's in the image of a peacock from the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. Fash Florals has created a hoop dancer. So these are the kind of things that we're bringing to life in tandem with the cultural institutions. Perfect, thank you. It is a historic moment. I'm Andrea Purcell. I own Addison Taylor Floral Design. This is our first time at the Fleur de Ville show. I saw it years ago in Vancouver and was just in awe and knew for sure that that was something that I needed to be a part of if it ever came to Winnipeg, and here we are. Our mannequin is Gwen Hobig from the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. We have the 9-foot life-size violin behind her. We really wanted to showcase that as, you know, it is her 37th season and she's stepping away this year.
We have surrounded her in big blue, beautiful waves representing one of the pieces that she plays by Debussy. So we wanted our podium to be Gwen at her final concert this Mother's Day at the concert hall, surrounded by Lemaire. And we have the three composers, Debussy, Strauss, and Mozart, looking back on her.
You heard from Gwen Hobig about what she thinks of this?
You know, I sent her a Facebook message actually, trying, because I for sure would love to meet her, and you know, I'd love to see what she thinks of it. That's super important. But I have no doubt that Fleur de Ville will arrange that for us.
What do you think about having Fleur de Ville here at the Leaf in particular?
It is so special to be in this building. We are so thrilled to be here. This is our home away from home when we're in Winnipeg. So when we were first in touch with the people at the Leaf at Assiniboine Park several years ago, it had yet to even open. And I think that we both felt that the marriage was such a match made in heaven. But when we came last year for the first show, that was solidified. It is such a beautiful backdrop for our shows. We are privileged and honored to be here to do the shows here. It doesn't matter how old you are, what language you speak, how much money is in your bank account, everyone loves flowers. It's a universal love. So people love to come to the shows because they can relate. We celebrate flowers with every major milestone in our lives. It's just a joyful experience. And so we love bringing flowers to the people in this unique way.
Fleur de Ville Artiste is on now through January 26th at the Leaf. For CBC Manitoba, I'm Shanalee Vidal.
Full disclosure, I actually closed my eyes, so I didn't watch the YouTube piece. I just listened because I want to go, but I want to be completely surprised. But if you want to watch a little bit of the preview, we didn't give it all away, but you can have a look. It looks just beautiful and colorful and lovely on a January day. It is right now in Winnipeg, -2.
Be an Iron Man and curl. No, not your hair. This is curling on the frozen ice of the Assiniboine River. Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is back February 7th to 9th. Form a team, embrace the winter with one hand, a rock with the other, and join the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
7:44 a.m. and the mayor is in studio. Mayor Scott Gillingham for our monthly interview. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
We're going to turn to news of the day and topics, but I want to give you a moment because you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about Nello Altamar this morning.
Yeah, the news of Nello's passing is just really devastating. It's a huge loss for our community. I was with Nello in September. He and I were at an event together. It was an event with students, and Marcy, it was quite remarkable to watch him just leave all the adults at the door and head right to the students. And I just watched. I thought, this man is like a fish in water in this classroom. And he stopped and talked to each of the students and asked how they were doing, checked on their work, really affirmed them and encouraged them. And I know today that a lot of people are mourning his loss. He was a great champion for education and really for building a better Transcona and a better Winnipeg, a better province. So on behalf of the people of Winnipeg, my sincere condolences to Nello's family, his friends, and to all his colleagues at the Manitoba Legislature.
Nello Altamar was just 61 years old, and news of his passing official yesterday. He, of course, had been the education minister at the provincial level. Let's move into the homeless strategy. So this was obviously announced this week. I know you were at the announcement. What's actually, though, the city's role in what's going to be happening out there?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited about the announcement. I've been calling for one coordinated plan to address homelessness, get people out of encampments into housing with wraparound supports. And so I commend Premier Canoe and Minister Smith for this announcement. And the city will be full participants and full partners in this work. The city's roles are several. Several of our departments will be involved in this plan. For example, our Public Works Department will be involved and water waste once it's time to clean up the encampments. We'll continue to have our bylaw officers involved as well when needs be, and we continue to work with our fire paramedic department, who often have to go into encampments to check on the health of individuals as well. So at every front, wherever the city is needed, I have told the Premier we'll be full participants and partners to really get a handle on getting people out of encampments into housing with the wraparound supports and getting those sites where the encampments are cleaned up so that they're back, usable to the public again, whether it's a riverbank or a park or a playground.
Because part of it is preventing new encampments from popping up once people have moved on into better housing. I want to ask you also about last time you were here. We talked about, I'm switching gears here on you fast, but proposed snow clearing pilot for next winter. A lot of Winnipeggers wrote into us about this one. This is where the city, you're saying that it's proposed you'll wait till 15 centimeters of snow fall on city streets before initiating a plowing operation. I understand there may be some news on this?
There is, and I can tell you, my office has had more emails and calls about the snow clearing pilot proposal than we have about the property tax increase. And so Winnipeggers are really want us to keep our snow clearing at the current standard, the current level. And so today, Councillor Janice Lukes, in her Public Works Committee meeting, will be bringing a motion to cancel the pilot project. We won't do the pilot project. I support her in that. We've heard from the residents of Winnipeg, so there will not be a pilot project that starts next fall.
And is that really just because of that response from Winnipeggers? Because when you were here and we talked about it, you said you thought this would be a good way to save money, that it wouldn't cause that much disruption. Is this just following what the public has said?
We've heard loud and clear from the public on this. Now, our Public Works Department, like all other departments, will continue to be responsible to find cost savings, to control costs as well, but there will not be a pilot project. And so Councillor Lukes will introduce a motion today at her committee. I support her in that.
I was going to say, where are you going to find the money now?
Well, there was really, we didn't put any, estimate any savings. Yeah, we didn't put any savings into, we didn't book any savings, is what I'm trying to say.
Though.
We didn't book any savings into the budget for the pilot project because we didn't know what the outcome would be. And so there's no impact to our budget.
From snow to fire, obviously the Sutherland this morning is literally smoldering on Main Street. That building is being demolished currently. That stretch now of Main Street, I mean, vacant lots, we've had fires. We've had a record fire year, in fact, record number of fires in the city in 2024. How do you, or can you, how can the city make that stretch of Winnipeg, where we have a lot of vacancies and a lot of buildings that could deal, with development. A lot of people might be thinking that could be part of our housing plan moving forward. How can you make that more attractive to developers to move into those vacant spaces or vacant lots?
Yeah, I agree with you in that statement that all of those lots, all those vacant derelict buildings, they represent potential for housing at a time where we need housing. And the Sutherland was vacant at the time. So we are tackling vacant and derelict buildings. We have 700 of them in the city of Winnipeg. We have far too many vacant and derelict buildings. So what we're doing right now is we're pulled together a table of not only City of Winnipeg departments, Marcy, but we've got the private sector, the nonprofit sector at the table as well to try to solve this problem together. Often governments or levels of government will just try to address the issue on their own. What we're moving towards now is to say, look, we've got a lot of smart people with good ideas in the community, so let's bring people together. So, for example, Darrell Warren, of his neighborhood association in the North End, he's at the table. Folks from Build are at the table. We've got all of our departments at the table as well, trying to work on this issue of vacant and derelict buildings together. Two things primarily: reduce the number of vacant and derelict buildings and get those sites redeveloped into housing.
What do you say to developers, though, who are going to say, I'm not going to go and fill the lot on the Sutherland that's going to be left there because, I'd rather build in another area of Winnipeg. How do you make that area more attractive, maybe?
Well, I think part of it is the dialogue with the developers to say, what would it take for you to develop here? What can the city do and assist with to make it more attractive, this area more attractive for development?
Because so those conversations are happening now.
They are, and I really think all of these areas represent potential to transform a neighborhood.
Let's talk about a development that we actually haven't talked about in the morning show. It's been in the news a lot. And forgive me, listeners, but I have to set this up and there's lots of detail. So Ria Mae Forest is where we're going to talk about here, what we're going to talk about. This is out in St. Norbert. So this is sort of the short notes here. There's a private developer trying to build and cut trees. There have been protest vehicles on city land blocking access at points. Now, Manitoba Historical Records is involved. They say there are likely unmarked graves in the forest because from 1904 to 1948, it was an orphanage. It was a home for unwed moms. Records show there's a mortality rate that was close to 60%. So that means between 1,200 and 2,300 children died in the building. So I'm raising all of this because one of the protesters has filed a legal action. They say the development violates the Cemeteries Act because of what I mentioned there. The developers filed for contempt, saying this is private land. I'm developing, get out of the way. Russ Wyatt now, city councillor, says he wants the city to expropriate the land and get involved. You, I know, Mayor Gillingham, oppose that. You're on record opposing this. Why do you oppose it, and what concerns do you have, if any, about this, what's developing around Ria Mae Forest?
Well, first of all, and I appreciate that you laid out all the different initiatives that are going on right now related to this property. And so I have been, and consistently, I'm working quietly behind the scenes. And one of the reasons I'm working quietly behind the scenes is that, and having conversations with all these different partners, is that there are several things from legal action being taken on this matter. It is private property. Private property owners do have rights. But, every time politicians will talk about this property, it seems that the value goes up. So when people talk about the idea of purchasing the property, a conservancy purchasing the property, or the idea of expropriation, I think we have to be very cautious and prudent and wise in dealing with this matter. And so there's a lot of, as I said, a lot of action, a lot of activities happening behind the scenes. There was also talk about the idea that perhaps the area is habitat for a certain pileated woodpecker, and that they nest
There's
there.
environmental concerns and now the grave concerns.
So I'll continue to work behind the scenes to get a resolution to this matter. But right now there's a lot that's happening related to Ria Mae Forest. I'm
not hearing that you're firm, though, in saying we're not getting involved, developer go ahead and develop it because of all the moving parts with the wildlife and also with this potential for a Cemeteries Act challenge.
Yeah, I think two things. Property owners do have property rights, and I think we have to be careful. We do have to be careful on that as a city, Winnipeg. But second of all, there's legal action happening right now related to this matter, related to the property. So I think we need to see how that plays out as well. I'm going to get you to put your headphones on actually here, because I have a clip to play for you. The Premier was here last week, and he said something about the city. Last time you were in, actually, we were talking about the funding cut to the Millennium Library Community Connection space. You mentioned that jurisdictionally those services should be run by the province. So the city was effectively pulling out. But this is what Premier Wapkanu said to this.
Cities across Canada provide services like that. So I think we really need everybody to step up here. But what we're doing as a province, we're building housing, and we're going to ensure that there's a wraparound services so that once people move into housing, they can actually be successful there.
Hang on, though. Are you going to fill that gap that they left? Because it sounds like you just said that's a civic responsibility.
We are doing a huge amount of heavy lifting when it comes to social services and when it comes to ensuring that we have housing stock in place. We've stepped up time and time again to ensure that we have outreach supports, that we have other supports.
How do you feel about the city shutting that space, just as the last question?
Well, the city's making a lot of decisions, and I think they'll be held accountable for the decisions that they made by the people of Winnipeg.
So, Mayor Gillingham, I'm not here to pit the two of you against each other, but does that response prompt you to rethink the closure of the resource for the downtown population?
No, the Premier's right. The city will be held accountable. Province held accountable for its decisions. Federal government held accountable for its decisions as well. So I really don't take issue, with the Premier's comments. The city of Winnipeg is doing a lot, so more than I think we've certainly done in decades when it comes to addressing homelessness. As I said, we are full partners with the province in the plan to get people out of encampments into housing. We fund 24/7 safe spaces. We fund mobile outreach. We have low-income bus passes. We fund a public washroom. Winnipeg and Manitoba is different than other cities. Other cities have like across Canada, there are other cities. It's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, where some cities have responsibility for social services. Many years ago, there was a partnership between the city and the province, where the province took on social responsibility, the social services responsibility, and the city kind of moved out of that jurisdiction. So we continue to be full partners, and I think that's the message I want to get across. We're working with the province. We'll continue to work with the province to help people, get out of encampments and into housing.
I want to ask you about what you raised there, though, 24/7 safe spaces and warming spaces, because, obviously in the last week we also had the death in the ER, and we know at the time there were people there that were not there for medical reasons. We were told by HSC, that in the ER department, that they were there to warm up. We know this happens. Marion Willis was talking about St. Boniface Street Links, and they have the pilot project ongoing on St. Mary's Avenue right now, where people are being diverted and coming in. But everybody in the city is sort of screaming for more 24/7 warming welcoming spaces. What can the city do, and what is the city's role in opening more than what is already committed to?
Well, I think, first of all, we've funded, like the one you talk about with St. Boniface Street Links on St. Mary's Road. That's a City Winnipeg building that we've opened up for St. Boniface Street Links to use. So we fund 4 24/7 safe spaces right now. I think now with the new provincial plan, which will include a navigation center, I think that's going to be key as well. I'm really glad to see that Tessa Blakey-Whitecloud is in the lead role there. Her connections and her experience.
Are there more though in the budget? 24/7 safe spaces? Is that on the books in the plans?
No, there's no more in the budget right now. But again, we have a brand new plan from the province of Manitoba, which the city's going to be a partner in, which includes a navigation center. The goal is to get people out of encampments and not into temporary, 24/7 safe spaces,
but that's
warming
going to take
places.
Years.
But
you know what I'm going to ask you. This
is
morning, if someone's cold, it doesn't help them.
Yeah, it is going to take years. But again, we've expanded our funding to 24/7 safe spaces. With the opening of the navigation center, that's going to be critical as well. So the province has also accessed federal flex funding, which allows for investments, for example, in the Siloam's temporary winter shelter space as well. So we'll continue to be partners in what we do.
Just quick last, what will the navigation center, you've mentioned that a few times, so when is that likely to open and how will that impact immediate shelter needs?
That's a question for Tessa Blakey-Whitecloud and the province, but my understanding is that navigation center will not only be a place for people to be warmed up, but also that would be the space where people can get the connections they need for all the services that are required.
Okay, so that could be part of the answer. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
That is our monthly interview with the Mayor of the City of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham, in studio live with us at CBC. Heather Wells is here now with headlines.
Good morning. Well, the Sutherland Hotel is coming down. Demolition crews moved in early this morning after yesterday's massive fire at the vacant hotel. This morning, as the building is reduced to rubble, police and fire crews still on the scene. Main Street traffic still impacted. Southbound lanes are open, while Main northbound is closed between Higgins and Jarvis. Tributes are still pouring in for Manitoba's education minister. Nello Altamare passed away Tuesday. The former principal turned politician is being remembered as a man with a larger-than-life personality who dedicated his life to students in this province. We're going to hear from his fellow cabinet member, Justice Minister Matt Wiebe, coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In Winnipeg, -2, mostly cloudy, and for the day, it's going to be very windy, and the wind chills will feel like -12. Our high, though, is -2. We're not going to move from where we are now. And we do have a winter storm watch, does include the city of Winnipeg, but nothing's going to be happening until tonight. Coming up on the program after 8 o'clock, we're about to hear on World Report what is going on with the Israel and Hamas ceasefire deal. It does have some stalls, so we're going to hear about that, and then we're going to hear from 2 Manitobans who are watching very closely.
On Cue with Tom Power. Real-life married Canadian actors Paul Gross and Martha Burns are appearing on stage together to play one of theater's most dysfunctional couples, George and Martha from Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Paul and Martha will be here to tell you why they wanted to take on this role and how they're finding the love in it.
What you see one night, you absolutely could never see again.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It has been 25 years since Vladimir Putin came to power in Russia. At first, he was seen as a reformer, but soon he was crushing dissent in that country and provoking Western powers. Putin's story coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Israel's security cabinet is supposed to convene this morning to approve a ceasefire deal with Hamas, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that meeting is now postponed. He says Hamas has reneged on parts of the deal. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik is in Jerusalem following developments. And Sasha, what seems to be the holdup?
Well, this is a really complex deal, and there's a lot of logistical details in this that seem to go beyond what a normal ceasefire might be. You know, even as the mediators were announcing that this deal was done, the officials and the negotiators were still, in fact, hammering out certain things. And it seems now that some of that wasn't hammered out completely. Even yesterday, the Israeli government said there wouldn't be an official announcement until they were finished with all of this. And it seems as though this morning that is delaying the government vote and the cabinet meeting vote, which has to happen before this ceasefire goes into effect. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accusing Hamas of introducing new things or reneging on elements of the deal, which everybody assumed were done.
What have we heard from Hamas?
Hamas has put out just a very short statement saying that it is committed to the ceasefire agreement as it was announced yesterday. But of course, that leaves a lot of questions that are vague.
This ceasefire deal has been celebrated by leaders around the world, but are there signs it could cause political issues for Netanyahu?
It has caused political issues for him. And in fact, many people believe that it didn't happen earlier because of these threats by Netanyahu's political allies. These are far-right, hardline parties that want to fight until total victory. That's their slogan. And even today, two of these parties are threatening to quit the coalition if the deal goes ahead. We're not sure what's going to happen yet, but that's the discussion that's going on now and is putting a lot of pressure on Netanyahu.
Thank you, Sasha.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Sasha Petrusik reporting from Jerusalem. Since the ceasefire agreement was announced yesterday, the Civil Defense Agency in Gaza says more than 70 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. Christelle Gomansing is covering that part of the story from London.
As much as we lost, we are looking for the future. We're looking for what's next.
For Saeed al-Saad, a resident of northern Gaza, the hope that comes with the ceasefire deal is powerful.
We really want this hope. Like we want something like this, a good news.
While there were celebrations on the streets of Gaza Wednesday night, daybreak has brought heartache. Loved ones gathered in Gaza City, the wrapped bodies of their relatives at their feet. Victims, officials, and the Hamas-run government say were killed by Israeli airstrikes in the hours leading up to and after the deal was announced. Smoke was seen rising from the strip earlier today, but Israel Defense Forces, which regularly posts details about strikes to its social media pages, has yet to share any information about operations it's carried out. Mustafa Barghouti is an activist politician in the West Bank and leader of the Palestinian National Initiative. He says peace between Israelis and Palestinians is possible, but
we have to deal with the core problem, allowing Palestinians to be free from occupation, from oppression, allowing us to have democracy, to have prosperity. This is what we are aiming for.
Like many, he is hopeful the ceasefire deal mediated by Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. can lead to change, but it still depends on many moving parts. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Mark Carney says he's a Liberal outsider, but one with the skills to lead the party. And today, the former Bank of Canada governor could formally launch his campaign. He is expected to make the announcement in Edmonton, a city that right now has just one Liberal riding. Let's bring in Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, Edmonton? Why is Carney kicking off his campaign in Alberta?
Marcia, let's say you were a brand new Liberal leader, you didn't have a seat in the House of Commons, and you were looking for a safe place to run. Well, Alberta ain't it. Edmonton is, though, where Carney grew up. And launching a political bid, well, that's all about storytelling. So, well, yes, he has headed up the central bank in 2 G7 economies. And yes, he moves in powerful circles, lives in a posh Ottawa neighborhood now. But he was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. His dad once ran, unsuccessfully, for the Liberals in Edmonton back in Pierre Trudeau's day. The endorsements have begun, including from members of the current Liberal caucus, who aren't the be-all, end-all of winning this race. Votes from registered Liberals in ridings not currently held by a Liberal count just as much. But MPs bring organizational teams. One of them, Parm Bains, is going to be hosting an event for Carney in Greater Vancouver tonight. Immediately after this launch, MP George Shahal from Calgary was out spreading the word about this launch earlier this week. But if Carney was hoping to run in the only Edmonton seat currently held by a Liberal, well, that gets awkward because Randy Boissonneau was out on social media yesterday announcing he intends to run again. And Boissonneau's endorsing Chrystia Freeland.
All right. Well, speaking of Freeland, what about her launch plans?
She was out on her social feed yesterday, too, saying she's spending hours making calls, would have more to announce soon. Freeland did receive the endorsement of Health Minister Mark Holland yesterday, who confirmed he is running again the 905 and is going to lace up to fight in her corner. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson will also be speaking to reporters this morning on the heels of fighting for Canada's interests in Washington this week. He's still on the fence about a leadership bid.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa.
The anticipated 70-mile-an-hour winds have yet to materialize.
That is Los Angeles County Fire Chief Anthony Maroney. He says the Palisades and Eaton fires are not expected to get bigger. They are the two largest fires and are still both less than 50% contained. The low winds have helped firefighters. Most red flag warnings have been lifted, but powerful Santa Ana winds are expected to return next week. Joe Biden is leaving public life with a warning for Americans. In his final address as U.S. president last night, Biden says he sees growing danger in the concentration of wealth and power and what it could mean for American democracy. The CBC's Katie Simpson has more from Washington.
My fellow Americans.
Sitting behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, President Joe Biden used his final speech to the American people to issue a grave warning. After more than 50 years of public service, he made the case that he's leaving the White House at a dangerous time for American democracy.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy.
While he did not mention the president-elect by name, he was outlining his concerns about Donald Trump, the extremely wealthy members of his inner circle, and whether they will respect the guardrails of American democracy, stressing his fears about fast-moving developments in technology and how that, too, is being used in the concentration of power.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit.
Biden leaves the White House a deeply unpopular president, and on that basis, it's likely many voters and his critics will dismiss his warnings in this moment. The real test of this legacy speech will be decades from now, when the country will know whether his fears came true. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
In one of his last acts as U.S. president, Joe Biden has signed an order aimed at strengthening U.S. cybersecurity defenses. Its provisions will make it easier to go after foreign adversaries or hacking groups, especially if they try to compromise internet or telecommunications systems. It will also make it easier for U.S. authorities to sanction foreign governments that target the U.S. with cyber attacks. In Cape Canaveral, Florida.
5, 4, lift off.
That is Blue Origin's new Glenn rocket blasting off early this morning. This is the first mission to space for Jeff Bezos' company. This launch is the second liftoff attempt this week. An earlier launch was canceled following complications with a propellant line. Until now, Blue Origin has only used its rockets for suborbital space tourism. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm R.C. Marcusa. This is Information Radio live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app. You might be watching on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Got some weather systems that are going to cause issues. An Alberta clipper moving in, snow to the north and to the south, the winter storm watch. But we'll get into the details of today before all this starts developing a little later in a moment. Speaking of developments, as you've just heard on World Report, the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal is on hold. But there is still hope that after 15 months of bloodshed and war, that a deal will happen and could happen as early as Sunday. We're going to talk to two people this half hour. One of them is a Emily Kalo. She is an Israeli-born citizen living here in Winnipeg, so we'll get her perspective on all of this. The other guest is Mona Zengana, who is a Palestinian student from the University of Manitoba, also here in Winnipeg. So stay tuned. They will both be our guests. Right now, though, let's go back to Heather Wells in our news center with more developing stories.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's mayor says the city is canceling a snow clearing project. Scott Gillingham this morning says the negative response was so strong, the city's decided to scrap it and continue plowing residential streets at 10 centimeters, not 15, as was proposed. And the Sutherland Hotel has almost been completely demolished. Crews moved in early this morning after yesterday's massive fire at that vacant hotel yesterday afternoon. This morning, Main Street is still impacted. Southbound lanes are open, while northbound Main is still closed between Higgins and Jarvis. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
The forecast now from Abby.
We're just looking at a chilly day across the province. Snow and gusty winds in the forecast. Winter storm watch and snowfall warning in effect for parts of central Manitoba and northeastern Manitoba, so you need to be safe out there. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -2, and that's a high for today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
So yeah, the temperature not moving. Anything not moving in traffic, May?
Yeah, we got a call from CBC Sierra Sanders, actually. She's driving in northbound St. Mary's Ave and noticed a stalled car at the Vaughan intersection. As well, if you're driving down Main Street, you will, if you're on northbound Main, it's closed between Higgins and Jarvis for the demolition of the Sutherland Hotel. Anything else you're seeing out there, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, let's just reiterate what you may have heard Marcia Young sing on World Report just now. The Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal this morning is on hold. Israel's security cabinet was going to meet this morning to approve this deal, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Hamas reneged on parts of the original document and needs to back down. Hamas has said, though, it is abiding by the agreement. And so there is still hope on the horizon after 15 months of what has been really unbelievable for the world to be witnessing, the violence and the bloodshed and the fears. As I mentioned, we have two guests on this morning for their perspective on the proposed ceasefire and also what things have been like for them. Emily Kalo is our first guest. Emily's an Israeli-born citizen living here in Winnipeg, also a student at the University of Manitoba. She also, I'll mention, lost one of her friends on October 7th. That's the day Hamas militants attacked southern Israel. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what were you thinking yesterday? Obviously, we have a stall this morning, but as I mentioned, still hope. What went through your mind when you were hearing the news that the ceasefire is close?
It was such a feeling of relief, I think, for so many of us, for anyone who's driven by on Sundays by Superstore on Kenniston. You've heard the Jewish community here locally, but also internationally, really, chant this mantra of bring them home. It's always been about the hostages. Everything has been about bringing our hostages home. So to see that there's actually an opportunity to end the torture and suffering of these families who haven't seen proof of life of their loved ones, who don't know what's happening to their loved ones, who haven't seen their loved ones in 467 days, to know that there is hope for them, that they will get to reunite either with their loved ones alive or at least get, a proper, respectful burial for their loved ones. It's a different type of relief. I think the whole community is really just cautiously optimistic that we'll get to see that happen in the next few days.
Have you been in contact with any family back home about, what they're saying about this?
Absolutely. And this has been the chance within Israel for the government to come to a deal, for there to be a ceasefire and to bring the hostages home. It has been loud. You can see those protests since the start of the war, really. So I think so many of them, everyone in Israel knows someone who is being held hostage or knows someone whose friend or family member is. It's such a small-knit community. So I think, again, it's really just this optimism that this is the beginning of the end. 33 hostages are supposed to be released in phase 1, so that can't be the end. We will have to make sure that this actually goes through and all phases are met. But if that's the case, I think everyone will just be filled with relief.
I mentioned you lost a friend on October 7th. How are you feeling and how are you thinking of your friend today?
The his legacy is something that I think of every day, but especially seeing the names of who's included in the 33 to be released in phase one. It's not lost on me that these are people that were at the Nova Festival, just like my friend. Like in the hours of October 7th, the beginning hours, we weren't sure where he was, if he was one of the hostages, if he was alive or not. And obviously we were met with tragic news, but to know that these people being held hostage are no different than him. Some are even younger than him. There's even, babies being held hostage, a 2-year-old. So I think it's not lost on me, the gravity of the situation, and knowing how much his family has gone through, to know that other families will get to reunite with their loved ones. It's quite significant.
Do you want to speak his name? Just because sometimes, obviously, I want to give people space to really remember those that they've lost.
Absolutely. His name was Ben Mizrahi.
What questions do you still have, Emily, about this agreement?
I have a lot of questions. First and foremost, this agreement is almost identical to one proposed in May that Israel agreed to, that was not agreed to by Hamas. And we know the cost of that, not only the Palestinian lives lost since then, but also we know that the hostages were killed as retaliation in between then. Parents like Hirsch Goldberg Poland's parents, Rachel Goldberg Poland, who lost their son, whose son was murdered since then. So I have a lot of questions about why there wasn't more international pressure for Hamas to agree to the same deal then and to hopefully end this earlier, but also questions about what's the long-term plan for this? How are we going to rebuild Gaza for the Palestinian people? But also, how are we going to reconcile with the fact that the Israeli community and the Palestinian community alike are going to be traumatized from this, are traumatized? There's going to be intergenerational effects of this. So I'm curious to see the long-term plan about how we can really make sure that this isn't just a short-term solution, but actually bring some long-term peace to the region.
Yeah, as people, you're right to raise that this is a step and one obviously that we need to discuss. But this is phase one of a multi-phase plan, and what Gaza will look like, moving forward is not even on the table for that's going to be discussed in future phases, for example. So there's much to still figure out. You were alluding, though, to relationships and to, I think your term was intergenerational trauma, and what things look like. What's the impact been of this conflict on your relationships here at home in Manitoba with others?
It's impacted every relationship, I think. The impact that your identity has and how it intersects into every aspect of your life has really been poignant over the last couple of years. But, here in Manitoba, we grew up hearing our grandparents, as Jewish people, we grew up hearing our grandparents talk about the horrors of the Holocaust and World War II and their experiences of anti-Semitism and Canada's part in that and the way Canada reacted to that. So, we were told those stories and we often thought naively, we're lucky that won't happen to us. But the events of October 7th and the international reaction to that and dismissal of the Jewish experience and the Jewish trauma, I think has really honed in on us that, those aren't mutually exclusive. Our experiences are not innately different from that of our ancestors, and there's resilience in that and intergenerational power in that, but also trauma that we need to work through as a community.
What have your conversations been like with other we mentioned you're a student. I'm wondering with Palestinian students, and what do you hope those conversations might be like moving forward?
Those conversations have largely been led with humanity leading, with empathy leading, which is, I think, the only way we can lead these conversations. Obviously, this has been a time of tension, a time of suffering and trauma for both communities, and I think recognizing that is where we need to begin. And I really do hope moving forward we're able to recognize our shared humanity, our shared values. We're all Manitobans at the end of the day, so that doesn't negate our separate identities as being Israeli or Palestinian or Jewish, but that's something we can connect on. So I do hope that there's more opportunity to have not only a debate and discussion, but also discourse and really talk about the difficult things, but remembering that, we're all coming from the same place.
Here's to hope. Emily Kalo, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
That's Emily Kalo, Israeli-born citizen living in Winnipeg and a student at the University of Manitoba. We're going to talk to a student who is Palestinian coming up in a moment.
The CBC News app delivers the answers you want to know and need to know.
What an extraordinary scene.
The breaking stories that shape your world. Reporting from the scene onto your screens.
Dropping the 8 now. We're just approaching Gaza.
your source for mobile news. Delivered when you want, where you want.
This situation has changed very quickly.
The CBC News app. Download for free.
Time right now is 8:21 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you so much for joining us. And in Winnipeg, mostly cloudy. It's -2. We're going to be there for most of our day. Wind chills will make it colder, though. And we are expecting a snow. There's a snowfall warning for northern Manitoba, 15 to 25 centimeters. And there's a winter storm watch affecting Winnipeg that's going to be moving in tonight. Strong winds are going to be expected. It's going to ice everything up. Temperatures are going to fall over the next couple of days. Well, as I mentioned, I just want to reiterate where we're at this morning. The Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal is on hold. Israel's security cabinet was going to meet this morning to approve the deal. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying Hamas reneged on parts of the original document and needs to back down. Hamas has said it is abiding by the agreement. And so after 15 months of this, there is still hope. And so we're having our conversations this morning with Manitobans who have been leaning in, how could they not be, over the last 15 months? For another perspective, we have now reached for another perspective in studio with us this morning. We now have Mona Zangana, who's a Palestinian student over the University of Manitoba. Good morning. Nice to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again.
So what were your initial thoughts and how are you feeling this morning as this is close?
I'm not very surprised that this deal is on hold. I've been keeping up with it and have been seeing reports not only, through CBC and Al Jazeera, but even through Israeli news reports that unfortunately citizens are scared that the government will be the ones to kind of ruin this deal and delay the hostages from coming home, as well as I've seen news reports from security cabinet and members from the Israeli government who are just completely opposed to a deal like this. And so I'm not very surprised, but I do hope that they can come to something right away as soon as possible for everybody to be safe, all the hostages to go home, and for Gaza to stop getting bombed, because even while they are talking about the ceasefire deal, they're actively bombing them there.
In the last hour, we were actually talking about that. I think there's been 80 deaths. How are you, when it comes to the details of the deal, what questions do you still have about it?
I still have questions on how many Palestinians will be released. I have questions on I think phase 2 and 3. I think we need to get more specifics into phase 2 and 3, and I don't think just giving us a little bit of details on phase 1 and saying, we have more plans for Gaza in the future is good enough. They need to be working harder.
There have been, obviously, online right away over the last 24 hours, these photos online and video in the news of Palestinians celebrating in Gaza. How do those pictures sit with you?
It's really touching and heartwarming to see those pictures. I'm very happy for them that there's a chance that they could get a little bit of peace. And, it just shows how strong they are as a people, that even while they are actively being bombed, they still have that hope and faith, and they still have that in them to celebrate that they could finally feel safe. I do also think that they are the only ones who have the right to be celebrating. Everybody outside of Gaza and Palestine, there's nothing to celebrate. We have to keep doing our job and keep doing better, and there should have been more done to prevent all of this from happening in the first place. And just because there is a ceasefire and there is a hold on the bombardment in Gaza, it doesn't mean that Gaza or Palestine is free. There is much more work that needs to be done.
How are Palestinians in your community here in Winnipeg feeling, and what was the reaction? And tell me about your connections there locally to bring it to our community here.
So we all kind of feel the same. We won't believe it until we see it. We've seen deals before. Back in November there was a ceasefire deal that barely lasted until they started bombing Gaza again. So we're all just kind of on the same page where we'll believe it when we see it. And how long is this going to end? Because there's been a pattern even before October 7th, there's been a pattern of Israel bombing Gaza and whatever else they do in the West Bank, which is a completely different subject. So it's a pattern for us. And so
we had a student on just now, another student who was an Israeli background student, talking about their relationships here and her hope that moving forward, there'll be a rebuilding. And she was also acknowledging intergenerational traumas just to sort of bring it here home to Manitoba. What are your hopes moving forward on that front?
I kind of heard a little bit of what she said, and I do agree with her. For both Palestinians and Jewish people, it has been very tough. I hope that all the Jewish people do get their family members safe, and I do hope that there are no deaths, as well as I do hope that the Palestinians can finally live in peace and stop the bombardment. Both of them are going through tons of intergenerational trauma and post-traumatic stress, and I do hope that moving forward, specifically within the university, connections can be built and we can kind of come together and advocate for both of our communities in a secure and safe way.
CBC is actually on campus in the next 2 weeks, so we'll be exploring some of this in discussions. As I ended the last interview, I'll say to Hope, and thank you very much for being with us, Mona. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Mona Zangana, Palestinian student over at the University of Manitoba, of course here in Winnipeg, speaking to us with her perspective today. If you want to go to what's developing in this story, as we mentioned, there's been development since we were on the air this morning. You can go to our national website, which is cbc.ca.
The cold of winter melted by an array of floral artistry to warm your soul. Fleur de Ville Artiste comes to the Leaf at Assiniboine Park January 16th to 26th. Bedazzled by figurines decorated in flowery fashions, designed by Manitoba's vibrant art scene and blossoming floral talent. Fleur de Ville Artiste, proudly sponsored by CBC. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
When you have to leave everything behind,
you're just trying to find a way to stay here for a better life.
What are the real costs of making a new start?
I have faced so many hardships financially, emotionally, and physically.
A CBC News series looks at what it's really like for newcomers.
I am losing hope.
Welcome to Canada, the immigrant experience.
Prepare yourself because coming here is not that easy.
Everywhere you get CBC News.
There's flowers on the table, a card that says I love you. The dishes are done, dinner is made, and the table set nicely for two. I wish this was the first time I've seen a setting like this, but I've seen it before. I know the drill, and I know that I must resist. 'Cause you're only nice when I'm leaving, and that's not fair to me. You say the right things and pull me back in, then it's back to the same damn things. And I admit that it worked for a while now, but I can't keep doing this to me. 'Cause you're only nice when I'm leaving, but that's not enough for me. You say, darling, I'm sorry. I swear this time I'll change. And you give me that look, take my hands and promise it won't be the same. Part of me wants to believe you more than I'd like to admit, but I can't keep believing the same things over and over again. 'Cause you're only nice
When I'm Leaving, name of the song, as sung by Jade Turner. Turner's third studio album, by the way, Breathe, is coming out just a couple of weeks on February 7th. It's time now for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's -3, mild and messy as we begin Thursday. Our temperature's not moving a whole lot, staying around -2 through the day. It's going to be windy with a mix of sun and clouds and a good chance of late-day flurries. Well, shovels out across parts of the province as an Alberta clipper heads our way. A winter storm watch has been issued for southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg. Snow and blowing snow beginning tomorrow, creating reduced visibility and treacherous driving. And it is a snowfall warning for parts of central and northern Manitoba with between 15 and 20 centimeters expected beginning tonight into Friday. And speaking of snow, Winnipeggers have spoken, and Mayor Scott Gillingham says the city has listened. The city will not move forward with a snow clearing pilot project. Last fall, the city proposed changing the threshold to plow residential streets from the current 10 centimeters to 15. Well, this morning, Scott Gillingham tells Information Radio the negative response was overwhelming.
My office has had more emails and calls about the snow clearing pilot proposal than we have about the property tax increase. And so Winnipeggers are really want us to keep our snow clearing at the current standard, the current level.
Gillingham says Councillor Janice Lukes, chair of the Public Works Committee, will move a motion this morning to cancel that pilot project. A more than 100-year-old Main Street hotel is this morning a pile of rubble. Demolition crews leveling the Sutherland Hotel this morning. The boarded-up hotel went up in flames yesterday. It is one of several vacant buildings in that area to burn. The head of Heritage Winnipeg says more needs to be done to develop and redevelop vacant buildings in and around Main Street. Cindy Tugwell says the Sutherland, like others, could have been used for long-term housing.
This would have been a great building for that. So I guess we're talking about the protection of these buildings has to come from a solid business plan on how to reoccupy these buildings.
Tugwell says Winnipeg has close to 700 vacant buildings. Mayor Gillingham says the city has a working group of developers, social agencies, and nonprofits discussing ways to make the area more attractive for development. Well, some Manitoba housing tenants may be offered money by the province so they can afford to switch to housing in a private market. It's one of the province's new proposals to end homelessness. The idea is to free up existing social housing units for transitional or supportive housing for people who now live in encampments. Avram Sharak is the Professional Property Managers Association of Manitoba head, and he says a vacancy rate of 1.7% in Winnipeg's rental market may make this part of the strategy a challenge.
The majority of that vacancy rate will be in larger, more expensive units or very inexpensive units, which often are less desirable, which may be what the people from the housing take, but you hope they get good, safe units no matter what. So really we're talking more like a 1% vacancy rate, and what it looks like is a problem to house all the people.
A recent report from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation shows the average two-bedroom suite is currently going for just over $1,500 a month. An expert in finance says Donald Trump's tariff threats are already hurting Manitoba businesses. The president-elect has vowed to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports as soon as he takes office. Soo-Yik Au is an associate professor of finance at the University of Manitoba. He says the prospect of tariffs is causing some businesses that rely on exports to delay investment, to scale back orders, and to reduce staff hours. He says Canada must retaliate if Trump makes good on his threat.
Nobody wins in a tariff war. Like many wars, nobody wins. It's a question of who loses the most. And we need to make sure that it's clear to Mr. Trump that if there is going to be some sort of conflict like this, he's going to lose more than we will.
The First Ministers yesterday signing a communique pledging to do all they can to stop the U.S. from imposing punitive tariffs on Canadian goods. That was all the First Ministers except Alberta's Premier. Tributes continue pouring in for Manitoba's education minister. Nello Altamare passed away Tuesday. The former principal turned politician is being remembered as a man with a larger-than-life personality who dedicated his life to students in the province. Manitoba Justice Minister Matt Wiebe was Altamare's seatmate in the legislature, and they became good friends.
He was just a passionate, strong advocate for his community and for the things that he cared about, most notably education. And as I said, a dear friend, and my condolences are to his family and to the community that he represented.
Altamare took a leave from his ministerial role in October for medical reasons. He was heralded by many as the mayor of Transcona. Nello Altamare was 61 years old. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, Aaron Broman, and Megan Ketchison in our news center this morning. Our live team, May McKillop, Kevin Nipatebo, and Abby Adeyemi. Big thanks to you guys. Also, today's show content producers were Chloe Friesen, Shanley Vidal, Jason Empson, and Kalkadan Mulugeta. Let's have a look at what's going on in the commute.
Just a quick reminder that northbound Main is closed between Higgins and Jarvis due to the demolition of the Sutherland Hotel.
All right, thanks, May.
Thanks, everyone, for
calling. Let's get to going. Abby, I can't even talk. Let's go to Abby to end the show.
It's snowfall effect, and you're ready. The snowfall warning in effect for central and northern Manitoba, and then southeastern Manitoba should be bracing for that winter storm coming our way overnight into tomorrow. So, good luck.
I love that. Serves me right for rushing, not being able to speak to. What do you always say to me?
Chill.
Slow down, sister. It's true.
Chill.
I'm so impatient with technology too. I'm one of those people. Press all the buttons. It'll fix it. Take care of you well, everybody. We'll talk to you again tomorrow on Information Radio. This is CBC.